Hi. This is Novel Admire. Welcome to my channel. Have fun. Legend of the Supreme Soldier. Chapter 1, Treasure and Trash. Its eponymous function was for trash disposal. As science continued to advance into the space age, humanity's lifestyles underwent a paradigm shift. Life became comfortable, tranquil, and the initial urgent concerns about resources and ecological balance had diminished due to advancement of humankind beyond the skies. As more new planets were discovered and humanity's space technology matured, society developed more hectic and humanistic lifestyles, and trash. The costs of recycling were too high, but leaving trash around would have negative impacts on society's living environment, not to mention the inevitable discontentment that would follow. The solution adopted by the nations was to dispose of their waste on these so-called trash planets. Trash planets were either naturally lacking or artificially deprived of resources and not to mention uninhabited, which made them ideal landfills for trash. Under gray skies, a variety of trash formed a mountainous landscape. The land is silent, the air dead. Cool metals gleamed with unique metallic coldness, but dust had masked their original shine. Only an occasional spot untouched by rust would remind one of their former glory. On this apparently lifeless trash planet, one would have thought no human could exist, considering the harsh environment, devoid of food and water, lacked the necessities for survival. There was only one thing here: trash. Ye Chong raised his head to study the antiquated analog clock, found 3 years ago at the foot of a particular mountain of trash, 10 kilometers away. Its touch-based motion sensor was damaged then, which took Ye Chong a week of fixing to function again. The clock now replaced its predecessor, an even more outdated pendulum clock. It was now 3:42 FT, foul time, and Ye Chong knew that in another 13 minutes, the weather outside would reach the day's most suitable temperature for heading outdoors, and this decent climate would end at 6:17 FT. At other hours, the weather outside would either be as scorching as an oven or as cold as the peak of winter. According to routine, there should be a scheduled trash disposal last night. Ye Chong considered for a trip outside today, to see if he can score some new goods. Not that he was lacking in food, that engulfer he caught last time still had a great half of it left, enough for another 3 days. Besides, there was still a good stock of organic liquid food left, but they tasted far worse than fresh meat, more like wax, which had been left alone for quite a while. It was 3:55 FT, and Ye Chong sprinted out of his home in a blink of an eye. Time was precious to Ye Chong. The current location where the automated trash disposal ship discharged of its cargo was half an hour's journey away from his hideout, which implied that Ye Chong's hour-long trip to his destination left him with only less than half an hour's time to forage. Ye Chong scampered through the labyrinth of trash like an agile creature with incredible swiftness. He was very familiar with the ins and outs of the local landscape, and Ye Chong believed he could still find his way through even with his eyes closed. The headwind whistled past his ears, and Ye Chong enjoyed the satisfaction that came with his speed. But he was always alert of his surroundings, for survival on a trash planet would mean violent encounters with all sorts of mutated life forms. Trash planets were unsuited for human habitation, but for mutated life forms, they were no doubt heaven. The hostile environment was nothing to the highly adaptable mutants. Local resources were bountiful. Trash, for the rat-like engulfer, was food, and so on this very planet, their numbers grew exponentially. This planet was also unlike its cousins that were untouched by humanity, popular spots for mech pilots to tempt their fate. No mech pilot would want to lay a foot on a forbidding place like this. Without the meshs hunting them down, the mutants flourished in the absence of their greatest enemy. Ye Chong's home was in the middle of a mountain of trash. The route leading to it was a crack not more than 4 meters wide. Jutting metal beams on the exterior made for a dangerous-looking facade for the route's entrance. Ye Chong did not slow down, his stride long and powerful. One would have mistaken his movements as that of a primate, the agility astonishing. But there were no spectators on this trash planet, and this amazing moment belonged to him and him alone. Ye Chong pushed hard with his legs and leapt through the air, and as he reached the peak of the jump, he grabbed onto a horizontal titanium beam that was suspended midair. He then swung around it and did a few flips before landing steadily on the trash mountain. Ye Chong came to a halt and used his right index finger to caress the nondescript jet black metallic ring on his left ring finger while calling out softly, "Winnie." A grayish-green mech appeared before Ye Chong, and he mumbled out of habit, "If only I can find a neural receiver this time, voice command sucks." He slipped easily into the pilot's seat. Winnie's build was like the average mech, around 10 meters tall, with a thick-set bulky body and equally thick-set limbs, all amounting to the looks of a metallic lump, and the undeniably bald head was a comical touch. By virtue of age, the mech's exterior appeared dull, but the rounded shoulders and knee joints embedded irregularly with barbed hooks added points for a merciless impression. Winnie's body was scattered with wounds of all kinds, like scratches and bite marks, and the sight was ghastly. But Winnie was obviously well cared for, boasting a spotless exterior, all proof how much Ye Chong cherished the machine. If not for Winnie, Ye Chong may not have lived till today, at least as far as Ye Chong believed. He could not have survived through more than 2 engulfers without a mech, and the rodents out here were never found with less than 5 in a group. On this trash planet, being weak was synonymous to a quick death, the law of natural selection fully adopted by the ways of the local inhabitants. There was one person whose story reveals a close relation between a man and a mech, and that was Ye Chong's foster father. Ye Chong only knew him as Jiao Shi Chang, the rest of his background remained a mystery. According to his foster father, he was initially the only man on the trash planet, until one day he found a boy, with the words Ye Chong written on his body. As to how his foster father arrived on this trash planet, and his former occupation, the man was ever so tight-lipped about them. This mech was the result of his foster father's foraging. It was originally a mech made for public use, which, after his foster father's interminable modifications, was nearly unrecognizable for what it once was. According to him, in the outside world, almost everyone owned a mech, but since most of them were recycled upon disposal, it was hard to find one on trash planets without a good deal of luck. Under his foster father's influence, Ye Chong developed great interest in mechs, and his foster father was generous in sharing his knowledge. The duo frequently engaged in exciting discussions around the very much aged mech processor at home. The mech was named Winnie, which, according to his foster father, was a classic brand of engines for outdated mechs. Unlike his foster father's preference for modifications, Ye Chong had an almost innate instinct and sensitivity in maneuvering the mech just as it is. As such, Winnie was always piloted by him. His foster father once mentioned that Ye Chong would make for a fine pilot one day. After a close encounter with 5 engulfers that led to an intense battle and a successful escape, Ye Chong began to train himself conscientiously for the actual combat. After his first taste of fresh red meat, he could never take interest in the organic liquid food churned out from the food producer machine. Ceaseless ordeals in actual combat meant Ye Chong was no longer his old, innocent self, with the exception of a few terrifying and ferocious creatures that Ye Chong would never dare approach. All other life forms were no longer a threat to Ye Chong. But, if Ye Chong was careless, these creatures could still be potentially fatal. Unfortunately, Winnie was too old, such that even after all those adjustments, the lack of good parts and tools meant that Winnie was already as good as it would ever be. The fatal flaw would be Winnie's brain, which was too outdated. His foster father might have been an expert in the mechanics, but he was absolutely clueless about mech processors. The man once said, "For any mech, if the engine is its heart, then the processor is its soul." Ye Chong felt restricted in many ways, piloting the current mech. Winnie's only slightly redeeming feature was its pair of bionic eyes. When Ye Chong brought them to his foster father's attention, even he had no idea what model it was, with only a rough idea that it could be a new model from recent years. After all, he had wandered on the trash planet for decades, whatever advances beyond the planet, he could not obscure. It was thanks to this pair of modern bionic eyes that Ye Chong escaped from danger time and again. Although Winnie was old, until such time where a newer mech could be found, Winnie was Ye Chong's only choice. Ye Chong carefully upped the speed for Winnie until 80% of its maximum speed, as this allowed for faster travel with room for emergency adjustments. The travel was smooth, and Ye Chong arrived at his destination without obstructions. Anywhere he laid eyes on was filled with trash, but there were distinct areas where the trash were more recent additions, and these were Ye Chong's goals for the day. Scanning commenced. Winnie's voice was unrushed, with a slowness akin to an aging senior. Ye Chong thought helplessly, but he scanned his surroundings warily. For once, Winnie carried out a full scan with its eyes but will cease all other functions, thus, Ye Chong will have to be fully alert for threats. Ye Chong examined some corners where mutated life forms could possibly emerge from, all the while muttering, "Come on, old buddy, you got to do some good today. I haven't had any new stuff in a while. Come on now. Come on." Eventually, Ye Chong began humming a little tune. All alone on this trash planet, if he went on for some time without uttering a word, Ye Chong was not sure if he ever could again, and so, despite the lack of another person to interact with, talking to himself had slowly become routine. Ye Chong maintained a casual facade, but his slightly tense posture spoke of his state of high vigilance. Scanning completed. The announcement was like music to his ears. Ye Chong exhaled deeply in relief. Switch to high alert mode. Ye Chong gave Winnie the order, and immediately scrutinized the scan results relayed from the processor, a few red patches on the scanned images looking particularly conspicuous. Ye Chong could not contain his excitement. It seemed that the forage this time would be fruitful. Scavenging in the trash heaps. Ye Chong spitted at grains of sand that made their way into his mouth from the mech's crevices. Damn it! Not one of them is useful, by the heavens, surely I could not be so unlucky. Ye Chong wailed, his initial excitement gone without a trace. He had searched through many spots, all ending up with useless junk, and now only the last spot remained, with the smallest object on the list. Based on the size, Ye Chong could not figure out what it could possibly be used for, but better a mistake than a missed opportunity as he dived headlong into the mountainous heap of trash. Ye Chong half laid on a chair, munching on freshly roasted engulfer's meat, as he toyed with today's only object of value. It seemed to be a metallic hanging ornament with a dull metallic shine, and only the size of 3 fingernails. It was roundish with a perimeter lined with a curved blade, and its surface densely covered with queer patterns that seemed indistinguishable, but possibly based on some unknown underlying principles. Sadly, a chipped corner and some cracks along the blade told the story of a damaged, secondary article. Ye Chong murmured, "What is this? What a strange material." His thumb gently caressed the edge of the blade, and a thin cut appeared which Ye Chong felt nothing from, until the sight of crimson brought on a flicker of pain. Very sharp indeed. Ye Chong was slightly surprised. Surely this gimmick is not a hidden weapon? Ye Chong watched as a drop of blood hanged off the edge of the blade, from the cut earlier. Lo and behold, a mysterious phenomenon occurred. Beyond the bounds of possibility, the blade unexpectedly absorbed the blood, much like a sponge. A blood-absorbing metal. Ye Chong jumped back in shock. There was no mistake, he touched it, and the blade was undeniably metal. Ye Chong bet that the scene he just witnessed was no illusion. The eeriness showed no signs of stopping. The blood-fed ornament emitted a light buzzing sound, the curved blade retracted into the body of the ornament, and the cryptic patterns on its surface began to move. The ornament behaved as though a machine grinding in operations, and Ye Chong's blood was the catalyst. Ye Chong was completely dumbfounded. A voice resonated without warning in Ye Chong's mind, "Do proton examination completed, brainwave matched, brainwave locked." Ye Chong frantically exclaimed, "Who's there? Come out." His vision sharpened as he scanned his surroundings, his hand quietly reaching for the dagger holstered on his leg. "Are you sure?" The same voice sounded uncertain. Chapter 2, Man and machine. Are you sure? The same voice sounded uncertain. Nonsense. Just show yourself and we'll see. Ye Chong's expression betrayed mild impatience, but the intensity of his gaze were a contrast to his apparent emotions. Ye Chong arched his body slightly, like a bow ready to fire, prepared to deliver a fatal blow. Then I'm coming out. The voice maintained its level tone. Immediately, the room dimmed, and Ye Chong did not manage a reaction before hearing a deafening rumble as a huge wave of trash engulfed him whole. The trash planet fell silent again. After a long stillness, in a trash heap near a pulse signal relay station, a hand suddenly emerged from the heap, and a filthy man climbed his way out of the trash heap. Cough. Cough. Bad things come in threes, huh? Ye Chong cursed as he shook the little rocks and sand grains out of his clothing. Up to this point, Ye Chong could not understand what had happened. Could it be that this was the legendary mode of self-destruction? He looked on at the sorry side of the area, the entrance to his home no longer there, everywhere was just trash and more trash. Ye Chong shuddered at the aftermath. How long would it take to carve out another entrance? Ye Chong cursed murderously under his breath, once I find you, you little scum, I will make you pay. The fury in him burned like a lasting wildfire. As Ye Chong stared at the perpetrator of this whole incident, he found himself speechless. The root digging took 3 whole days, and the thought of the long and arduous process fueled Ye Chong's anger towards the perpetrator to new unprecedented heights. But when Ye Chong tried to deal with the perpetrator, the fire would not catch. Its metallic shell, aesthetic and powerful, the alternating blue and white laser coating pristine, the mixed surface completely spotless despite being amongst filthy and disgusting trash. When Ye Chong found it, it was just quietly standing there, firmly, as though nothing in existence could ever perturb it. Ye Chong knew at first glance that he had found real treasure. If the first glance at the mech gave him joy, a second glance made Ye Chong understand profoundly the meaning of pain within joy. A huge scar extended from its left shoulder to its waist, even exposing part of its engine to the air, and the entire left arm was missing. It was as though a one-of-a-kind exquisite painting of perfection was forcefully ripped in half. This was a human-shaped mech, with a height of around 12 meters, its body painted with alternating blues and whites, with an elongated overall design, a world's difference from Winnie's thick-set bulkiness. The mech's body radiated a faint, mysterious metallic luster. The protective armor panels on the chest were like the ABS of well-developed muscles, but not cumbersomely so. The icy cold profile had edges that looked as though they cut, and hosted an enigmatic pair of blue bionic eyes that blinked rhythmically, emanating a supernatural charm. Ye Chong was stunned, as he stared at the dilapidated mech that destroyed his home. For a moment, Ye Chong was thoroughly captivated by this damaged but unique mech, as though the mech had bewitched his entire being with magic. Beep self-assessment completed, engine functions at 86%, left limb functions at 0%, cabin functions at 97%, other parts are fully functional. The gender-neutral voice interrupted Ye Chong out of his fantasies. Ye Chong blurted, "Wah, this is the real deal, a self-assessing mech." If one looked closely, one could see Ye Chong's mouth gaping wide enough to fit an engulfer's thigh and even drooling. The damaged mech suddenly spoke, "Hello." A mech that greets, Ye Chong thought in a daze, and greeted back instinctively, "Hello." The mech continued, "My name is Shang, you can call me Mew." Ye Chong was still not out of his reverie. "Oh, I'm Ye Chong, you can call me Yi." Abruptly, Ye Chong came back to his senses and flinched as though burned on the ass. He pointed at the damaged mech and stammered, You can talk?" The damaged mech that was Shang nodded gracefully. "At a certain level, your observation is accurate." Ye Chong repeated in disbelief, "A mech that speaks? Hum." With the addition of Shang, Ye Chong's home inevitably grew in space to thrice its original size. From Shang, Ye Chong came to realize that the hanging ornament was Shang's spatial control, but Shang seemed to prefer being outside than in the alternate dimension. Ye Chong was also grateful for the company. For a 16-year-old, loneliness was almost unbearable. Ye Chong sat down heavily, finally finished with his work, and completely exhausted. Shang imitated Ye Chong's actions, as it swooshed down to a sitting position beside Ye Chong with a loud thud. Dust erupted into the air, and Ye Chong was caught off guard amidst the chaos as he was sent tumbling to a corner by the strong gust. As he rose, face frozen in anger, what he found was Shang had smashed a large hole in the ground, and the mech was still sitting comfortably in the hole as it looked back with innocent eyes. Under the lighting, the tiny human and the huge machine sat side by side. Ye Chong asked curiously, what happened to you?" Shang answered, "Information corrupted, reason is unknown." Ye Chong gulped down a mouthful of water and laughed. "Ha, if it must be because you are actually not powerful enough, to be beaten up like that." Shang replied, "Information corrupted, reason is unknown." Ye Chong's laughter ended abruptly, and he moped. "Oh come on, can't you be a little more interesting? Don't just be like information this, information that." Shang tilted its head in confusion. "Interesting? What is interesting?" Ye Chong scratched his head in frustration, for he was stumped. That question is a bit complicated. Let's talk about something else. Are you actually male or female? Ye Chong sat in Shang's cabin, stupefied, as he stared in obvious disbelief, his hand caressing this and that in absolute adoration and admiration. You must be one of the best meshes there is, aren't you?" Replied evenly, "Information archive indicates that the answer is negative. Calculation indicates the probability of inclusion in the top 500 ranking mesh as 26%, in the 501st to 600th ranking range as 63%, beyond the 600th ranking as 11%. Ye Chong gasped in astonishment. 500 meshes? Are there so many more great meshes? But, back to your point, being in the top 500 is not too shabby. In any case, you're definitely better than Winnie. Naturally, Ye Chong did not fully understand the implications of Shang ranking within the top 500, even in its current state of dilapidation. Ye Chong had always dreamed of owning a mech more advanced than Winnie one day, and then he would march forth and challenge the trash planet's most ferocious mutants in battle. What would the giant iron lizard's meat taste like? Ye Chong licked his lips without realizing it. "Ha! The time will come when I crown myself as king of this trash planet." Shang heartlessly cut short his fantasy. "Winnie's strength cannot be calculated." Ye Chong immediately pulled a face. "I know that." Can I be your pilot?" he asked with anticipation. "Denied." Cries. "Oh well, it looks like he'll have to pilot Winnie himself." Ye Chong was deeply saddened, but he caught on to a puzzling aspect. "Then why do you have a cabin?" Shang was silent for a few seconds before responding. "Information is corrupted, query is impossible." "Then do you remember who made you?" Ye Chong asked, interested. "Information is corrupted, query is impossible." The ever so lonely Ye Chong was deeply absorbed in the conversation, and just as he was about to continue with the questions, a sudden alarm buzzed softly, as Shang announced, "Energy level depleted." Upon inspection of the energy indication display, the level was a hair's breadth away from zeroing out. Since Trash Planet 12 was situated close to a star, it had a nearly unlimited supply of solar energy, or at least Ye Chong never faced problems with energy supply. But when he used up all his backup energy cells on Shang and found that it did not even recover 10% of its full capacity, Ye Chong was confounded. As Shang connected directly to the solar panels, Ye Chong was speechless, and prayed that the energy cell circulating his house would last until Shang was finished charging that day. Shang was quiet throughout the charging process, and Ye Chong, bored with the whole process, dozed off. The next day, as Ye Chong rubbed off the sleepiness of his tired eyes, he found that Shang looked a little different. The machine's surface looked as if it was coated with an extra layer of shine that added to the mysteriousness of the mech. Ye Chong gasped, "Mew, you looked beautiful all of a sudden." Shang seemed to understand Ye Chong's meaning of beautiful, and explained, "This is the photon excitation effect, where inadequate energy supply produces a lifelike shine on metallic surfaces. The basic theory is that." Ye Chong sported his baggy eyelids and couldn't stop yawning. Shang seemed to enjoy the lecturing, showing no signs of stopping. Other theories involved are actually quite simple. They can be classified into the following fields. Ye Chong bowed his head, like a monk in meditation, and one would notice upon close inspection that a line of moisture had formed on his lap, forming a big patch of dampness on his trousers. Shang was not quite finished. And so, from here one can reach the conclusion that a mech's strength. A thundering snore cut off Shang's lecture. Shang looked angrily towards the source of the sound, and saw Ye Chong snoring rhythmically through his nose, incessantly, and his shoulders rose and fell with his heavy breathing. Shang humphed in anger. Chapter 3, In Good Company. In some corner of a trash mountain, two meshs laid an ambush behind some trash, and about 100 meters away were 5 engulfers scavenging through the trash for food, occasionally scanning their surroundings for threat. Ye Chong scrutinized the layout of the land and proceeded with a short discussion with Shang. Ye Chong piloted Winnie carefully, slowly approaching the 5 engulfers, taking cover behind various debris along the way. They stopped about 20 meters away from the engulfers, and Ye Chong exhaled in relief, as things were going smoothly so far. Ye Chong intended to move, when a sudden gust of wind blew past him and straight towards the engulfers. Ye Chong cursed inwardly, revved up his mech's speed to maximum and headed straight for the engulfers. Winnie sprinted towards the engulfers like a blasted cannonball. But it was too late. When the gust struck, the engulfers caught their scent with their keen sense of smell, and scampered to escape. Ye Chong kept his cool, guiding Winnie and targeted one of the engulfers, for when the creatures escaped into the trash heaps, it would be nearly impossible to get them. Ye Chong ignored the other 4 engulfers and pursued the remaining rodents securely. The air whizzed past his ears, and Ye Chong felt as though his blood was rushing, burning even. The world as he perceived it gradually slowed as his brain registered the excitement. His breathing shortened as though every breath took every effort he could muster, and his chest rose and fell in sync with his breathing. Every exhale burned through his nose, as though he was breathing fire. As he closed in on the engulfer, Ye Chong's hands kept steady, and began to regulate his breathing. Abruptly, Winnie ferociously flung a dagger. A resounding clink marked the weapon's landing not 3 meters ahead of the engulfer. The creature was running at full speed, and upon setting its eyes on the dagger, foresaw its potential bloody demise. The engulfer made a seemingly impossible twist, as it landed its forelegs on the flat side of the dagger and thrusted. It bounced off the dagger with its forward momentum, unharmed from the whole ordeal, executing a most remarkable feat. The engulfer's eye gleamed as if rejoicing the fact that it would survive the day. However, before the triumph was over, a sharp breeze headed straight for the engulfer, and even the creature's mediocre hearing could identify the horrors that came with it. The air squalling through the barbs on Winnie's knee joints shrieked dreadfully. If the machine's knees came into contact, the results would be fatal. Of all the life forms that could survive in the trash planet, none were honorable. Even when facing the seemingly hopeless situation at hand, the engulfer would not surrender. The engulfer arched its back, suspended momentarily in midair, and as Winnie's knee came into range, it dynamically bounced off the knee barbs with its forelegs, redirecting its momentum above, ambushing Winnie's neck. Puff, a faint wheeze can be heard as the barbs pierce the engulfer's forelegs and slice through its vulnerable soft belly, drawing some scars on its hind legs. On the trash planet, a wound this severe implied certain death, but that was not the engulfer's concern. The objective was to land a mighty blow on the enemy before its imminent demise. It mattered not if the blow was no threat to the enemy. Its fearsome teeth glistened coldly, these teeth that could cut through metal were the engulfer's last hope to leave an unforgettable mark on its nemesis. The engulfer's determination was akin to one's realization of one's soul, its act of self-sacrifice radiating with the utmost force of its life. The engulfer truly believed that this attack would be the most intense one throughout its entire existence. It's getting closer now, the enemy's neck grew clearer in view, and the engulfer felt an adrenaline rush. Just one more second, no, half a second. Just half a second was all it needed to execute the most splendid and glorious attack in its life. Its eyes were burning. Like fire, a blazing euphoria. Within seconds, the fire within extinguished. A silent blade that rose from below unhindered slashed the engulfer in half. In a flash, fresh blood and organs showered from above, splashing onto the rust-red soil below. Ye Chong finally simmered down. He looked up, and saw Shang observing quietly some distance away. The engulfer was hung on a 7 meters long titanium pole. Shang's strategy was simpler. Ye Chong positioned the meg right where one of the engulfers was escaping towards, making the oblivious engulfer defenseless against Shang's lightning speed and accuracy. Ye Chong waved at Shang from afar. Hey! He picked up the both parts of his severed engulfer. Ye Chong boasted to the mech, obviously pleased. Well? My skills are not bad after all. Shang replied flatly, a complete disappointment. Ye Chong did a double take. What? A complete disappointment? Were you even watching? To be criticized so mercilessly at something he took most pride in was not doing wonders to Ye Chong's dignity. Shang did not ease up. With the exception of mediocre battle skills, your flying skills, shooting skills and tactical accomplishments were extremely crude. Your experience in real battle is not accessible due to the lack of information. No way. Ye Chong's eyes widened with a face of disbelief. Shang shrugged, the image of amusing eccentricity. Of course, error in assessment stands at 0.3%. Ye Chong refused to give in. You must be real jealous to bring me down like that. Shang, the possibility of that is nil. Then it must be because my mech's too old, ha ha. That must be it. One day I'll give you a try. Shang paused, and continued in an odd tone, there were 31 escape routes in the trash heaps, how did you know one of the engulfers would pass by where I was positioned? Hee, awesome right? It was instinct. Ye Chong announced, pleased. Instinct? Shang's bionic eyes glowed in response. Information insufficient, calculation is impossible. Ye Chong scoffed at that. Calculate? If you can calculate it, then it wouldn't be called instinct. Shang replied calmly, it is only an event with a small probability. What? You're saying it was a coincidence? Just luck? I'm telling you. Ye Chong exclaimed in frenzy. Two shadows stretched longer and longer under the setting star. The spire that was the pulse signal relay station near Ye Chong's hideout could be seen from afar, like a landmark, showing the way home. Chapter 4, Brave New World. Ye Chong chewed on roasted engulfer's meat as he stared fixated at the schematics for Shang's inner structures before him. It took plenty of convincing for Ye Chong to get Shang to agree to this. The designs were too complex and ingenious, as Ye Chong admired inwardly. Under his foster father's guidance, Ye Chong was definitely qualified to be an expert in mechanics, but the schematics before him did not make much sense, meaning he would have to decipher it bit by bit, but this also dramatically raised his high opinion for the designer. After half a day, Ye Chong felt his eyes went arid, and so he shifted his vision away from the schematics and peeked at the static Shang by his side, and made an impertinent remark. Best not waste your efforts, this pulse signal relay station is not so easy to hack. Why, back then, my foster father tried numerous times and never succeeded. Shang was inert, as though Ye Chong never spoke. Ye Chong began his quirky habit of talking to himself again, as he mumbled against the schematics, it's not personal, but let's stop trying with this impossible task, you should use your spare time to teach me instead. I mean, I've stared at this tattered schematics for a good part of the day and my head hurts. But the designer behind this must be a genius, TSK. Amazing, amazing. Shang suddenly spoke up, hacking complete. Ye Chong's eyes did not leave the schematics while he replied in reflex, what? Hacking complete? I say Mew, when did you learn to joke? Ha, not bad, not bad. You're improving. But Mew, a failure is a failure. For something impossible like this, your failure is expected, and so, no one is going to laugh at you. Shang ignored Ye Chong and continued, Foul Star Systems Weekly News Review, Renaissance's new space station, the SS-Huatan will begin accepting new citizens this Monday. The first phase of new citizens will enjoy the following benefits. Ye Chong's eyes glazed for a bit, his hands paused from whatever he was up to, and shook his head vigorously before speaking in disbelief, You really did it? Shang replied calmly, undeniably so. Ye Chong asked carefully, Are you sure? Shang, I am sure. Ha, I can finally learn about the outside world, I can finally learn about the outside world. Ye Chong jumped with glee, and hit the ceiling with excessive force. Bang, Ye Chong was oblivious, as he continued to run about his house in excitement, fully relishing in his joy. Shang observed Ye Chong's emotional response, his cool face softening around the edges, but the moment was over in a flash as it resumed its usual composure. Ye Chong carefully sat in Shang's cabin, put on the helmet, and lay down silently on the soft seating, but his heart was anything but calm. There was excitement, hope, curiosity, and a little trepidation against the unknown setting. These plethora of emotions kept him agitated, unable to calm down. Shang's voice rang in his ear, Ye, ready? For some reason, Shang's voice had a calming effect on Ye Chong. Ye Chong took a deep breath, and answered steadily, ready. Just as he finished, Ye Chong's vision changed dramatically. Ye Chong shook his head dizzily, and Shang's voice returned when he felt better. Users accessing the virtual net for the first time would usually experience dizziness. This is normal, and has no negative health consequences. Ye Chong had a rough idea what that meant, and began to examine his surroundings. The first thing he saw was a screen made up of intertwined light rays in a wide range of colors. Those vibrant hues fluctuated and moved as though they were alive, creating and recreating new palettes. The strong contrasts inside moved Ye Chong like never before. For Ye Chong, who grew up on a trash planet, the world was made up of only metallic blacks and whites, the yellow from the star's rays, and the sweeping color of rust. He never thought colors could be so dazzling, so rich. Ye Chong stood there, mystified, as he took in the most stunning view before him. Someone passed by Ye Chong, noticed the look on his face, and swore under his breath, Idiot! That swearing woke Ye Chong up from his fascination. Ye Chong could not help but felt a little bitterness. What would these upper-class people know about his hard life? Fortunately, Ye Chong was not one to wallow in self-pity. After feeling lost for a while, Ye Chong picked himself back up. As though sensing his change, Shang, who was silent up until then, finally spoke up, Ye, you can walk through the light screen now. Ye Chong obeyed, and came upon a huge square. The square was displaying all sorts of machines that Ye Chong could not even identify, and the middle of the square was occupied by a large electronic display, broadcasting all sorts of news and information. The central square is the news area. This is also my first time here. Why don't you have a look around yourself? If there are any problems, just call for me in your mind, as I can detect your brainwave signal. Alright. It's settled. Shang's voice ended abruptly, leaving only silence. Ye Chong's smile wryly inside, but his worries were quickly replaced by intense curiosity. Ye Chong observed around him inquisitively, as he began to explore the area. More than a decade's worth of survival instinct led Ye Chong to be highly vigilant in unfamiliar territory. He kept himself about 2 meters away from anyone around him at all times, as that was his best striking range. so that he could respond in time to any unexpected circumstances. The ability to navigate quickly through the dense and irregular trash terrain on his home planet also added to his skill set, as he moved like a fish, slipping through the crowd smoothly and with style. On top of that, compared to the relaxing, strolling pace adopted by everyone else, Ye Chong moved as though he was in a rush for something urgent, but that was only because on the trash planet, every second was precious. It may be a matter of better returns, or a matter of life and death. Ye Chong was like a vicious predatory fish wandering amongst the carefree, slow-witted fishes, obviously out of place, and a bit of an eyesore. His foster father once said, outside of trash planets, humans live in peace and happiness, no countless life-threatening mutated life forms, no daily scheduled storms, no food scavenging through the trash heaps. Instead, they wear bright clothing, eat fresh and fancy meals, living a life of peace and leisure. They go to school every day, with many friends, and they have many different kinds of meshes. Ye Chong once asked his foster father longingly if it was paradise out there, but his foster father said no. Ye Chong was baffled. If a place like that wasn't paradise, then what else can it be? The young Ye Chong had spent countless occasions imagining the outside world as he thought it should be like, the mysterious, promised land of dreams come true. Now, Ye Chong could finally experience the world he had long wished for. Ye Chong could not really understand what he felt at the moment, as he walked on absent-mindedly, not knowing where he really was. Ye Chong stared blankly at the ceiling. He did not exactly remember how he got back, his mind occupied by a lingering emotion, one that he couldn't really recognize. He would need time to process the day's experience. Shang said nothing. His silence made it hard for anyone to guess what lightning speed calculations were running through his processor. The ceiling was as it always was, unchanged, and the night was as silent as every other before it. Chapter 5, Training Day. Ever since then, Ye Chong began to explore in earnest the mysterious and enchanting outside world. Out there, one can find almost anything, limited only by one's imagination. Ye Chong quickly warmed up to this illusory but undeniably real world. It took him no time to grow out of his initial shyness and be in his element. And Shang was up to something every day, coming and going as he pleased, disappearing almost immediately after accessing the virtual net every time. Ye Chong's favorite place was a large township called Kaista. Various meshes were sold here, along with their weird parts and accessories. But most importantly, here was the meeting spot for many mech enthusiasts, where they frequently gathered to exchange their thoughts on the machines. They were mostly mech engineers or professionals. The township's manager even installed a medium-scaled mech information archive here, which Ye Chong was always appreciative of. Ye Chong enjoyed the area's deep scholarly atmosphere, while the locals also happily embraced this eager and forthright young man, taking him under their wings. Through their guidance, Ye Chong began to understand how outdated his knowledge was, but it made sense. Since all he knew were taught by his foster father, and the man had been isolated from the outside world for decades, it would only be weird if something from decades ago remained relevant today. Fortunately, Ye Chong had a solid foundation, and now he fully understood why his foster father was so strict with his foundation studies. His solid foundation also made learning easier, as he took in new knowledge with great speed, and earned the favors of the older men. Today, as soon as he reached home, Ye Chong slipped into Shang's cabin and put on the combat helmet. Although Ye Chong adored the virtual world, he did not lose himself in it. He understood that the trash planet was his real world, and if he became too immersed with the other world, he would face real danger on this treacherous trash planet. Ye Chong kept his defenses up every time he went outside, with his full attention, free of distractions. Once on the virtual net, Ye Chong went straight to Kaista. But before he could catch his breath, Shang's voice came up in his head, "Yi, let me take you somewhere." Ye Chong felt intrigued. Was usually up to something these few days, absent from his own explorations. Ye Chong followed Mu Shang's instructions as he turned left and right, finally arriving in front of a huge building. Many people bustled in and out of the structure, and the place teemed with life. Ye Chong asked, curiously, Mu, what is this place? Mu Shang explained, this is the mech pilots in our training center, offering basic modules for pilots in our training and a platform for pilots to compare notes. Your skills were self-taught, and many of them were logical. I came about this place by accident and did an analysis of the training content, and while I believe there is a 7.63% imperfection in content, training here would be immensely helpful to improve your strength. Ye Chong felt uncertain. In art training? What's in art training? Mu Shang replied, the full term is neurosensory reflexivity training. It allows your neural system to remember specific maneuvers. To execute maneuvers that are up to standard in reality would require large amount of training for your body to achieve the required memory standard. However, a reasonable in-hour training would greatly reduce this training time. Ye Chong began to have a grasp of things. Oh, so it's like that. Regardless, if Mu Shang said it is beneficial, then it must be so, Ye Chong's inner voice concurred. The pilots in our training center was built by the FAL Association for Mech Pilots, and formed part of the available basic facilities in the virtual world. Ye Chong advanced into the main hall, neatly lined with many pillars. Some people could be seen passing by the pillars and vanished into thin air after a burst of light, and others seemed to flash into existence. The current Ye Chong was no longer an amateur. He casually walked to a nearby pillar, lightly tapped on the pillar with his finger, and a semi-transparent screen appeared before his eyes. Mu Shang introduced, there are 3 areas above where we stand, the basic training area, the mixed training area, and the battle area. Since this is your first time, let's try out the battle area. Right after Mu Shang finished, the screen display altered, showcasing the opponents for each room, and the number of audiences. Ye Chong picked one of the occupied rooms at random. Swish, and he was in the room, standing before a black mech. Ye Chong immediately recognized this as a beginner's common choice of the Blackbird model, due to its ease of control, gentle learning curve and affordable price. However, its functionality was at par with its status as an entry-level mech, armed with only a magnetic sword, platinum shield and 2 alloy daggers, not to mention the 2 redundant heat ray guns on its shoulders, with such low effectiveness that Ye Chong could not possibly count on them, but in reality, it's because Ye Chong did not really know how to shoot. The Blackbird looked like a huge, black bird, with 2 horizontal wings that could extend out like a pair of real wings, allowing beginners steadier flight in the atmosphere. Below the wings were 2 rows of secondary engines, although their functions were limited. Beneath the Blackbird's abdomen were 2 mechanical arms that could use the magnetic sword and alloy daggers. The heat ray guns were on the Blackbird's rear, the elongated neck allowing a wider range of shooting from different angles, although with the gun's power and Ye Chong's skill, or the lack of both, this advantage was wasted. But even if this was just an ordinary low-level mech, Ye Chong was already very excited. Compared to Winnie, this mech's functionalities were much better. Ye Chong entered the mech's cabin eagerly. When Ye Chong had a good look at his opponent's mech, he could not help but felt greatly discouraged. If his own mech was like an inconspicuous little bird, then the opponent's would be a glorious king of the birds, a phoenix. Its long elegant lines were like an artistic masterpiece, its dazzling and colorful wings and tail fins were like the phoenix's feathers, emanating an aura of great beauty. The flaming redness of the mech's body was a suffocating zeal. Even standing still, the mech exhibited an indescribable calmness and pride. Its name mirrored its appearance, Shadow Phoenix, as fast as the shadow, as magnificent as the phoenix. The Shadow Phoenix 2 model, the considerable amount of time spent at Heist had made Ye Chong very familiar with it. Compared with the Blackbird, the 2 mechs were not even at the same level. The Shadow Phoenix 2 was a classic long-range attack mech, with great speed and advanced shooting systems as its signature features. Besides that, Its beautiful exterior made it a popular choice for members of the female community. However, to Ye Chong, those nearly useless wings were a burden, and what use was an attractive appearance if it became the constant attention of the enemy? Without time for further pondering, Ye Chong received the signal to begin. Chapter 6, The Wavy Leap. Almost simultaneously both of the meshes moved. A glaring light shone upon Ye Chong, who had hid himself under the titanium shield, caused him to tumble. It happened so quickly that it left Ye Chong standing up clumsily and helplessly, finding out that he had been shot. The shield failed to perform its essential function to protect. The bullet penetrated it effortlessly straight to the edge of Ye Chong's rib on the left. The opponent was perplexed, realizing the fact that the shot was not able to finish Ye Chong off. Ye Chong in the meantime had discarded the titanium shield, for it was deemed useless. He sprinted for his life, hiding behind rocks or any kind of debris to distract the opponent. But the opponent was clearly equipped with battle skills. The calmness in the adversary suggested the trick did not work. SP2's strength was thoroughly demonstrated through the second shot. No suspense, no drama, nothing epic. After being knocked down countlessly, Ye Chong was enraged, with his eyes reddened, demanding a rematch again continuously. Shang's voice nonchalantly rang in his ears. There are scientifically 62 kinds of strategic ways to dodge a shot. Do you need me to teach you one? Ye Chong replied with a tantrum, you rusty nuts and bolts. You just watched me die a gazillion times and all you could do was lie there and talk? Was that on purpose? Man, you really don't care much, do you? Shang on the other hand responded with laid-back attitude, well, according to psychology, humans are more prone to remember pain and failure with a probability of 90 to 96% and by chance of 52 to 63%, the individual would utilize the experience as a motivating factor. Thus, I believe that by now the experience had successfully been imprinted on your mind, had it not? Ye Chong leapt out of his mech as he spat, You're good. He had an urge to smash this piece of blabbering trash in front of him into pieces. Shang couldn't be bothered and pulled out a visual from nowhere. Ye Chong contained his fury and swallowed his anger as he closely viewed the video clip. It was a brief video clip that lasted less than 10 seconds. There was no space for Ye Chong to figure things out as his eyes were glued on every frame of the clip as Shang's words echoed, look carefully. It was the same raven form mech, but it was more nimble, so agile that it could perform non-orderly wave movements as smooth as the ripples in the sea. There was no point of stagnation, making its next move extremely unpredictable. It was then that Ye Chong realized the beauty of the highest craft. His blood was burning as passion grew in him tremendously. The amazing skills the expert held could potentially be his. The desire. Sun Xuelin couldn't help but gaze at the opponent named before her in awe. Even though they were never at the same level, would always stand back up one defeat after another, a great tenacity that no commoner could muster. The victory that came easily one time after another did not satisfy Xuelin. Was undeniably a rookie in this, the mech he used justified it. A raven is always a symbol for rookies. There was nothing triumphant about a victory won against a newbie to a person who had been properly trained since young like her. And more strangely, whenever she received battle requests from she could never resist clicking the accept button, in which the outsiders would only find the fight to be pointlessly boring. Of course, a man of bravery should always be given a chance. Xuelin thought in order to comfort herself. She didn't notice at all the curiosity that rose, which bubbled deep inside her. What kind of a person is she? At a place far, far away from Trash Planet 12, Xuelin bit her cherry lips, her expressive brows tightened, her sweet face melted into bitter ponders as this time, no longer sent battle requests to her but instead remained silent. Is he finally giving up? Xuelin exhaled a sign of relief. Well, if it wasn't the time to give up. The simple functions of a raven could never dodge an attack from her SP2. Right, time to give this rookie a lecture about the basics. Before Xuelin could lift her lips, The battle request popped up in her face. Are you not done yet? Your struggle is pointless. You should recognize the differences between both parties. Xulin grumbled in her mind. Her hands acted faster than her mind, and before she was aware, she had already hit the accept button on the screen. Hee, just one more round I guess? Xulin snickered as her expression lit up as bright as snow. Ye Chong stared the ground between his raven and the opponent's SP. His mind kept replaying the episode of the battle he experienced as his body cowered, reflecting his anxiety. Shang once again interrupted with a nonchalant voice. This set of dodging moves is called the non-orderly wavy leap. The key here is non-orderly. Focus on that. That was all he said, all he was willing and wanted to say. No more. Ye Chong was angered to the point where he was clenching his teeth, but he couldn't do anything about Shang. He could only put on his thinking cap, wondering how in the hell world would he figure out the meaning behind non-orderly. Easier said than done. Non-orderly. 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 He muttered the word repetitively. Time waits for no one. Before Ye Chong could figure out what the heck non-orderly meant, the opponent had already accepted his request. Ye Chong ignored all the confusions and could only focus on the previous incident. There's no time for non-orderly or whatever the heck it was. Think. That very orbit without any signs of movement, that amazing curve. After maneuvering Raven for so many times, Ye Chong could finally have a better understanding on the properties of his machinery, rather than theories he could only recall before. This too gave him the painful truth that it would be nearly impossible for this mech to perform any fancy curves or leaps. Raven's computing system could never solve such complicated calculations. Very well then. It's only up to me now. The only thing Ye Chong found fortunate was his piloting skill, that developed from everything he had been through with Winnie, whose processor was far worse than Raven's. Ye Chong started breathing heavily, his every breath as deep as an old accordion. Beep. Ye Chong's arm began moving. Raven flew like an arrow in a curve rather than a straight line it propelled in. Almost instantaneously, Ye Chong was about to become a crater in the ground as he stood right before by the attack. Ye Chong was too busy to take care of that, his eyes fixated on the ground, his blood boiled like the hot iron, as heat rushed to his head. Ye Chong executed a sequence of moves, one after another in an overwhelming speed without any hesitation. Raven was able to maintain its velocity at its peak. Ye Chong's hands heightened with speed so much so that he couldn't figure out whether the vapor from his sweat caused the afterimages of his chains of gestures. But he was too focused to give two thoughts about it. Like, who cares? Xulin was doing what she usually did, aiming and firing, but she missed. She brushed it off like it was nothing, thinking it was merely beginner's luck. Had dodged one or two shots randomly before this match with pure luck. In the end, his defeat was inevitable. Nothing was to be gained but a defeat rubbed in his face. As time passed, Xulin felt something was wrong. Chapter 7, Burn and Rest. There were a few instances where Xulin was about to fire, but something distressing was holding her back, which made her awfully uneasy. The gun she held faith at all times disappointed her, as if troubled by her emotions, and started to miss on every single shot. Xulin instantly pinpointed the peculiarity in its movement. It appeared sinuous yet wasn't at the same time. HMPH. Trying to dodge my shots like a serpent, huh? Too naive, too naive. Xulin thought as she felt a sudden rage. It's not a big deal to master the curvature skill because everyone has their own set of techniques, including. After engaging in countless of battles, it will be possible for one to identify these distinctive skills. The regularities in X's curvature skill had already been spotted, seeing that there were hardly any variations which Xulin couldn't recognize. She began to study and calculate his movements in her mind while her eyes locked on X, picking out every variation in his movements, while waiting for the right time to shoot. When the time came, she fired without hesitation. Xulin stared in bewilderment as the shot she fired missed. As though he had foreseen this, He dodged the bullet with a twinkle in his eyes. Was this another case of his beginner's luck again, or was there something more? Xulin was flabbergasted as her thoughts circled in confusion. Taken aback by the whole ordeal, she went rampant on a barrel of firing on the field. Maybe it was a blessing from the god when one of her shots finally went through his left shoulder, causing him to lose balance. Ye Chong, on the other hand, was completely soaked by his sweat, and his hands felt heavier over time, as if they were starting to move on their own, seemingly twitching if this went on. He bit his lips out of panic and was already bleeding before he noticed it. In the midst of adrenaline rush, he felt a shudder from his neck, which came to his realization that he was shot. Despite that, his hands continued to key in commands, as there was no time for him to find out the damaged part of his machinery. Xulin gushed with excitement for her successful shot that left hanging like a broken wind-up robot toy. A golden opportunity awaited before her. There's no way she could miss this. She loaded her gun and was prepared to send a final blow. Ironically, it was the hit that made Ye's movements go haywire and became even more unpredictable than before. Naturally, it was not good news for Xulin. Coming to her senses on the aftermath, Xulin's distress caused her firing to run wild on the field again. Meanwhile, Ye Chong finally caught sight of his opponent, which triggered him, as well as his hands. It was as if they were electrified as they entered the commands at great speed. It's getting closer now. It's coming. Hiya! Ye Chong roared like thunder in his compartment. The opponent froze, taken aback by his scream. Was this a trap? Was there a plan B that she was not aware of? He no longer cared and had already drawn his magnetic sword from his back while his left hand reached for the alloy dagger tied to his left ankle. As long as I can get close enough, the opponent would be dead meat. He asserted himself and swung his sword, creating a buzzing echo formed from the magnetic waves of his sword. There was no resistance from the opponent as he sliced right through the throat. He was surprised at how simple it was. He was expecting a final struggle from the opponent, as an inflicted wound on a machine's throat was as fatal as it was on humans, but there was no retaliation. How could one make such an amateur mistake? Having to live on Trash Planet 12 long enough, he showed no mercy. He felt indifferent as he penetrated his dagger deeply and accurately, like a serpent sinking its teeth into its prey, right on the upper chest of SP, which would be the pilot's cabin. What heard next after the screeching sounds of metal shredding was the sound of applause for his victory. In the meantime, Xulin stared blankly in dismay at her floating chair. The network helmet she just disconnected was left levitating in the air. That very menacing figure that traveled speedily, that violent and direct attack, that tenacious bravery, lingered in the thoughts of Xulin, haunting her. Xulin shifted to the dining table right after, as it was dinner time. Her father Ninghai saw her so lost in her thoughts that she ignored the scrumptious dinner on the table, pondering. He then beckoned to his wife, but she just shook her head in helplessness of the situation. He asked her daughter, Lenny, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Xulin was startled as she wondered what had gotten into her, and yet on the outside, she forced a smile. Nothing. It's just that I met an oddity on the battlefield today. An oddity? Her father was intrigued. What kind of an oddity? He inquired. Xulin's father was a skillful pilot of meshes. All of Xulin's skills were taught personally by him. It was only then that Xulin remembered the fact that her father was of such a superior rank in her field. He must have been experienced enough to solve this oddity for her. She then began to narrate the entire sequence of events to her father. As soon as she mentioned about how Ye failed again and again, Ninghai nodded his head in approval. Good. I do agree this guy is pretty bold. The conversation became lighthearted as she spoke on. When she talked about the final match with him, how he portrayed extremely strange curvature skills as he drove towards her, her father's face stiffened. He asked for more details about the last matches. He tried to stress on the whole incident to help her recollect her thoughts on details she might have missed. Her father reacted seriously. If you were right on what you have described, This guy could have used an unorderly wavy leap. A set of dodging skills like this would only be known by advanced pilots. This is simply because not only does it requires a high-level manual piloting skill, it also requires a mech that is advanced enough. Only a sophisticated processor with a sophisticated mech could execute the complication in this set of calculation input. But he was only using a Raven. Xulin was puzzled. And that's why this was such an eye-opener to me. Theoretically and under normal circumstances, a Raven could never complete such an execution. Reason being is that it has limited processing capabilities even with a master piloting it. Thus, there could only be one explanation for this. He must have modified it by installing a powerful processor into the mech. Xulin gasped in disbelief, but I still think he's just a random rookie from out of nowhere. Seeing his daughter making such a statement, he snorted, so what even if he's just a random rookie from out of nowhere? Can't a rookie modify his own machinery? Plus, it could have been his teacher or his senior who did the modifications for him to ensure compatibility with his special way of combat. But well, this guy sure is something to be able to perfectly perform movements of such complexity. Still not convinced, Xulin rebutted, well then, why did he not use it in the very beginning? Why only execute it after a myriad of lost matches? Startled, her father replied, oh, this part, huh? Well, it's probably because. Xulin, let's just finish up our dinner. We have already discussed this at length and look. The dinner got cold. Ninghai's mother beamed at her husband who led himself into such an awkward situation. Even if Xulin's father's deduction made sense, somehow she still thought there was something amiss. The reality didn't seem to be like what he had said to her. However, she could not point out exactly why she felt awry. Her gut's feeling said so. Nevertheless, just like how her father never expected that someone could perform this set of moves manually without the aid of the processor, Xulin too never expected it in her mind. The discussion was a cliffhanger of embarrassment as she knocked her head, which felt like it was about to explode from her contemplation. Fine. Whatever. Never mind. Screw this. I'll just ask him myself the next time we meet. Simple. She thought. Chapter 8, Rehabilitation. Ye Chong had just gotten himself into a sticky situation. He crawled out of his cabin, as if he just swam back to the shore, all drenched, drained of energy and fatigued. Something went wrong with him. His hands looked fine but his fingers were squirming, dash an ache that felt like it was seizing his bone marrows, rushing through his spines, and bombarding his brain one wave after another. If it wasn't for his great endurance, he might have passed out right away. He wheezed, barely catching his breath while his face turned pale from immense pain. Despite the excruciating pain, both of his hands appeared all right to him. They were not swelling and there were no cramps. They seemed perfectly fine, that not even a strand of hair was lost. Not a single one. Shang performed a thorough inspection of his body and expressionlessly diagnosed, a symptom from overusing the senses. The neurological network connecting both your spinal cord and your hands had undergone abusive utilization that surpassed its capacity, thus causing the pain. The symptom will be temporary and will not cause permanent damage to your body. Resting adequately would be sufficient. The diagnosis received comments from Ye Chong packed with sarcasm. Resting adequately? How the hell would I be able to rest adequately with such injuries? I can't even rest in peace. There's a way to minimize the pain, stated Shang. That caught Ye Chong's attention. Are you sure? A pain that felt endless would torture him till death before he could overcome it, but if there's a way. The statement sparked hope in Ye Chong. Shang continued elaborating. This method requires neither medication nor any form of injection. It is safe and effective. You can feel its effects immediately. Excited, Ye Chong interrupted the explanation. Then, let's proceed with it. Are you sure about this? Shang halted and lowered his head, as he asked. For some reason, the question suddenly sent chills down his spine. This doesn't seem right. That face of I Shulouch. Nonetheless, the pain forced him acquiesce. Yes, I'm sure. Bam! A blow slammed right into the artery of his neck. He blacked out, and the only thought that surged through his mind was man. It worked. The voice of Shang ran through the room, calm and still, execution completed. As he sat before the fainted Ye Chong. After waking up, Ye Chong could sense the transformation in his body clearly, especially in his hands. Everything felt incoherent. His body responded slower than his mind, his coordination was literally out of sync, no longer as compatible as it used to be. Shang added, that is because your coordination has been disrupted. Your senses did improve tremendously beyond the limits you used to have, however your physical body remained the same as before and faced problems in coping with the processing speed of your mind. Consequently, you will feel sluggishness in your physical body, but in actuality it is just your mind speeding up. Ye Chong understood the side effects described by Shang and stopped entering the virtual web for the next few days. Instead, he performed physical training, especially dedicated to his hands. On a platform about half a square meter in size, he concentrated on controlling 6 marbles and rolled them between his hands back and forth, netting all marbles in his hand and moving them at high velocity and rate of collision, in a never-changing orbit. The velocity increased over time and beads of sweat could be discerned on Ye Chong's forehead as his hands caught up with the speedy movement. Gradually the beads of sweat came falling down like droplets of rain on his forehead. His hands rushed like shadows overlapping till after images began to form. It's coming back. In the end, he lost control and the marbles were scattered all over the place. He breathed heavily and ditched the marbles on the floor. Man, this was too tiring. Shang at the side evaluated Ye Chong. It was still not satisfactory, but well, you passed. After finally ending his boring marble rolling days, Ye Chong started wondering if those marbles were purposely made by Shang to torture people, both body and soul. Deep in his heart, he still adored Shang. At least, thanks to Shang, his hands felt like his own again and moved with better dexterity too. Oh Winnie! Getting back to Winnie again was wonderful. It was heartwarming to see his broken partner again after taking a break from mech driving for so long. All this while, Ye Chong had been busy with the marble training, and so his usual daily hunting was taken over by Shang ever since his injury. Ye Chong was astounded by the fact that he couldn't find any other form of wounds on the prey Shang hunted other than the small hole on the neck. He frenzied in the field with Winnie, one mountain of dump after another while Shang tailed behind at a fixed distance. That was the moment he could actually distinguish the changes in his hands before and after, more specifically the increased agility in his hands. As joyful as he was, he then remembered the steps Shang taught him before. That non-orderly wavy leap which allowed him to taste the fruit of victory the very first time kindled the eagerness in him. He switched to the highest gear and chained with a variety of calculations, performed a live performance on the spot, with that great leap he adored. Winnie at her age clumsily made a few disoriented orbits of different kinds under his control. Sometimes large and sometimes small. Sometimes it was a straight curve and sometimes it was a zigzag. And that wasn't all from Ye Chong. Being absolutely worked up, he continued making wavy leaps that were more condensed. In a brief period of time, Winnie began moving in tiny wavy steps at full speed. Unlike the disoriented curves before, they were all constant and orderly, while Ye Chong was still in the mood of making even smaller curves. Ye Chong had grand plans of his own. Right when he was on his attempt to further downsize his steps, a loud noise drummed his ears. Winnie was finally unable to withstand the complexity and had broken into half. Wham! Right at her waist. Ye Chong's joy became fear. He did not manage to call Shang for help as he had been thrown like a meteorite, all the way to the huge pile of dumps nearby along with the upper half of Winnie. Ye Chong had a concussion and was buried by the pile he crashed into. Darkness blinded Ye Chong. When Ye Chong. Wait, technically it was Winnie, not me. Again. When Winnie got pulled out from the deep piles of trash by Shang, Ye Chong saw the teasing expression of Shang's contrary to the usual expressionless face he put up, and it was extremely frustrating. The frustration intensified when Ye Chong was on his way home. He was being carried by Shang like a disabled person. The helplessness and the teasing from Shang he anticipated. He was frustrated, yet he was truly helpless without Winnie. Would never allow Ye Chong to pilot him either. Moreover, a rookie riding on a beginner? That felt too absurd. Can't help it. I am too weak in contrast. The foremost issue is still losing his mech. No matter how old Winnie was, she was still significant to Ye Chong's life, if there was no replacement, that is. By then he could only plead to bring Winnie's lower part of her body back. Regretting the consequences of his excitement, his heart turned cold. He should have known how aged Winnie already was and should have been aware of how long she had served him over the ages. It was a miracle for her to last this long, and now she was damaged in a way that is fatal even for ordinary mechs. It would be hopeless to get her fixed, especially when it happened in a place where there was nothing else other than piles and piles of trash. Never forgetting to spice up the situation with sarcasm, Mew said, "Ye, I can't stop myself but to tell you the ultimate truth of cruelty. The possibility to get Winnie fully repaired would be 1% and below. So stop gambling with a chance this low. It is against the value theory. In layman's terms, it's not worth it." Sorrow could be seen in Ye Chong when the realization of his helplessness struck him. He went into Shang's cabin and then, into the virtual web. Shang didn't seem to feel like behaving empathetically as his words echoed, "According to statistics, you have yet to master the 68 kinds of basic courses. This is the list." Stuffed right in his face was the absurdly long list, to which he responded with ignorance as drove on. The robot went silent for a bit and spat out, "Ye, if one day your skills surpasses me, I would let you ride me." He halted, got out and walked away, without making a sound or throwing a tantrum. Chapter 9, Bucking Up. It was almost the 8th year since Winnie started staying by his side. They had been through thick and thin, and rode through piles of garbage of varying heights. Winnie shielded him from raids and protected him from extreme weather. Winnie was the reason for his survival. It was his reassurance in life. She might be worn out, but in her lay the kindest elderly soul he could have asked for, in which she faithfully and dutifully fulfilled by serving her owner for the past few years. Something felt trapped within Ye Chong. What was it? Through all the years that Ye Chong lived, there was only once when he felt such a sensation, and it was during his father's death. "Is this grief?" he whispered to himself. "I wonder if Papa was doing fine on the other side?" Holding his chin, he thought in an enduring misery. For the whole day, he spent his time alone at a deserted spot on the planet. After that, he made his way to the training center and called Shang. "Mew, show me the course plan," he said in a casual tone. In the meantime, Xulin was irritatedly occupied. These few days she searched every single room on the battlefield, longing for a rematch with that person that left her with more questions than answers. That guy. Though disappointment slapped her in the face again and again upon seeing rooms with anyone else other than she was not going to give up. If he could face failure or any kind of letdown over and over again, so could she. The encouragement rang in her head. Yet, this is going to be another wild goose chase today. The day seemed to be anticlimactic as expected. I'll just go and visit Cousin Shou. She should be at the basic training field. Cousin Shou was the daughter of her second aunt and they had been good friends since childhood. Unfortunately, Cousin Shou had failed her mech examination several times before. Her mother thought of Xulin's father, Sun Yinghai, while she was thinking of a solution. She then begged the great man to enlighten her poor daughter so she could pass. Still, the man was great for a reason. He was so engaged in his work routine, he didn't even have the leisure to keep the promise. As a result, the promise was inherited by Xuan. The basic training field was used to its vacancy. At most, there would only be a few people using it. Most pilots in training did not fancy the NR training for its efficiency in comparison to actual hands-on pilot training. In addition, these were so elementary that everyone had mastered the training back during their early childhood. The emptiness of the field was justified. Idly, Xuan browsed through the rooms on the field. The room Cousin Shou was in was soon found and she entered immediately. It was a spacious, open land with a number of obstacles on the ground. Cousin Shou was unsteadily walking through. Xuan did not intend to interrupt the training her hard-working cousin was having. She just watched on at the spectator stands. Wait, there's another person. A dark silhouette slithered through the obstacles at an overwhelming speed. Who would still train here with such standard of piloting? She went to have a closer look. Wait. She was dumbfounded. That has to be. She hopped excitedly. Yes. It's him. It's him. The wound she made that day was still on the left shoulder of his raven. And the scratches on the rib. Yes. It must be him. Is this what they mean by God never disappoints the studious and heaven would help those who help themselves? She mumbled. Ye Chong frowned as he checked out the data shown on Raven. Almost. He muttered. He was so close to Muse standards. It was so near, yet so far. How many times have he tried already yet he still couldn't pass? Ye, with your learning capacity and basic theoretical knowledge, it would not be hard to complete the basic training courses, instead it would be a piece of cake. But if you find such standards satisfactory, you should never think of touching me. At all. Most people deny the significance of training. However, they are so foolishly wrong. Shang sounded like a hermit in his teaching, sassy and aloof, and this brought up a raging storm in Ye Chong, an unstoppable one. According to my calculations, 99.328% of actions of high complexity are actually derivations from basic execution. Thus, I could daringly conclude that, basic executions are the root of all pilots' skills. Ye Chong reflected on the statement. Shang pulled out a detailed list of parameters. These are the training requirements I had prepared for you. The standard has been tailored for Raven's capacity accordingly. Just do everything on this list. Shang's mechanical eyes blinked. Remember, never acknowledge the existence of limits within you. Ye Chong took the suggestion with pleasure. After staying on Trash Planet 12, he was more than eager to try improvising himself. Nonetheless, he forgot about Muse hysteria, the capricious and mischievous nature of his. Those parameters were impossible to achieve by Raven's capacity. At all. He faced the reality of this after going through the training. He worked on them through days and nights, whimpering, spitting blood, and then he finally made it. Just one of them. That was an achievement joyous enough to make him cry. Good job, Yi. Shang smiled, but you still need a little bit more momentum. Yes, a motivating factor is what you would need. I should implement a system that includes rewards and punishment. How about this? If you fail to fulfill at minimum one subject on the list after this, you would be having an organic liquid diet for a week. That'd be good. Yes. Mew sneered on as Ye Chong witnessed it. He didn't have a choice, without Winnie, only Mew could do the hunting. You fox. Ugh. Ye Chong hated liquid diet, flow food, fluid food, or whatever you name it. He hated it with a passion since he was young, be it organic or not. He had to make it. By hook or by crook. Soon it was the last day of the week. If he did not succeed, he was going to be fed with the infamous white, sticky, gooey liquid food for real. Just by looking at it was enough to choke him. It was so disgusting that only a man who had lost his mind would consider eating it. What was the problem? Why could he not make it? Ye Chong knew me well. He would never simply set parameters that a raven could not fulfill. But why was it always so close? Ye Chong was collecting his thoughts pitifully. Cousin Shou, who was in training, spotted her cousin on the stands, in which she quickly piloted her raven towards. That did not go too well, however. Her skills were way too incompetent that the raven was led to a floating metal pole. Bang! Cousin Shou panicked, screaming and shouting loudly until the entire field could hear her. The scream alerted Xulin, who was staring at since the beginning. She was horrified seeing the raven her cousin drove stuck in midair and was apparently going to fall anytime soon. This is bad, she thought. Cousin Shou had always portrayed a fragile, timid impression since her childhood, and that was why she never thought of driving a mech. If she ever fell, the shock would land her in bed for the next few months. Or even worse, a trauma in her memories forever. Then, she would not even dare to approach a mech ever again. Xulin immediately got onto her SP2 and moved towards Cousin Shou at maximum speed, hoping to grab her before she fell. But there were too many random obstacles in the air, and those halted her. Cousin Shou would hit the ground in no time and she could not reach her. Tears flooded her eyes as it was filled with anxiety. No. Meanwhile, the scream from Cousin Shou had also alarmed Ye Chong as he turned his head and noticed a mech of the same raven he piloted too. He did not hesitate and began inputting commands. His raven glided to its compatriot on a whim. Perhaps it was the conscience sunken deep in his mind, in which he wished for a companion more than anybody else after his lonely days with Mew. There was no time to think, and those scattered obstacles relived the scenery of the hunting field he used to go to. The set of inputs he learned over the past week flashed in his mind. As if awakening, he subconsciously began inserting commands without difficulty. He turned out to be much slower than usual in the end. Ye Chong's raven weaved its way through the flock of obstacles, like a breeze on a spring day, naturally, freely and directly. Right when the other raven was about 3 meters from the ground, his raven caught it in one go. He gradually decelerated and made one last glide for a short distance. He then landed successfully. There. All done, he exclaimed as he put down the raven. About 2 seconds later an SP2 came after him. It must be the ally of the raven. He speculated enviously while the mech was landing right in front of him. That seemed oddly familiar. Ah! This was the SP2 he matched with the first day he was here. He nodded slightly in respect as he watched it inching towards him. He intuitively took a look at the processor. What? Chapter 10, Dummy Ends. I actually completed the training? Ye Chong's brain jammed for a bit seeing the notification on the interface. How the heck did he even get it done? He hopped onto Raven and started going through the training programs, disregarding the number of tries and the ways he had done them. The parameters were all fulfilled, which perplexed Ye Chong. How did I even make it? Ugh, never mind. He wasn't that keen to get to the core of this mystery anyway. What was more importantly in fact that there was noteworthy advancement made in his piloting skill and most importantly, no liquid diet the following week. Oh joy! He did not stay any longer and ejected himself from the virtual web. To the marble training. The marbles were waiting for him. Though he had recovered from the desynchronized body movement symptom, Mew added marble training to his daily training schedule ever since when he got damaged. It might seem meaningless at first, but after the training, Ye Chong learned the fact that speed was indeed not everything. Returning to the virtual web, Xulin was trying to calm her poor cousin down, as she probably was intimidated from her near-death experience a moment before. Xulin held great appreciation towards. Thanks to him, Cousin Shou was saved right at the nick of time. Imagine if this guy was never there. Oh, the tragedy that could have happened. Wait. Her mind drifted to another perspective of this incident. He was at a location further away from her, yet he managed to make it there before her. Add to the fact that the velocity of his machinery was apparently higher than her. Fear shrouded her thoughts, in which immense curiosity soon dipped through. How did he elevate his ability at this rate? Or the match with him was just one of his warm-up activities last time? Was there indeed a let-up from him? Her pupils quivered in anxiety, her hair slid over her shoulder, tousled in worries, while her body shuddered in thin fragility. Cousin Shou's pale face frigidly portrayed the panic that lingered in her heart, like a distressed flower bud trapped in a storm of winter, pitifully arousing the empathy of its witnesses. Xulin lovingly caressed the poor flower, combing her smooth hair with her fingers. Cousin Shou couldn't hold it in anymore as she melted completely in Xulin's embrace, sobbing out her every horror. Xulin's fingers slipped through her shoulder, comforting her like a big sister. In actuality, their ages did not differ much. Cousin Shou was just younger by about 10 days, but her fickle innocence justified her relationship with Xulin, being the little sister walking behind Xulin the whole time. In fact, Xulin too, loves and cares about her little sister, for she was stronger in nature and was aided by her father's teachings. Under her protection, nobody would even dare touch the petite flower. To Cousin Shou, she is her protector. About 2 years ago, her aunt and the entire family moved out, and so they forcibly parted, yet her dependency on Xulin never faded. Now, don't cry, Shui, let's go home first, okay? G-O-H-O-M-E. She nodded in obedience and exited the virtual whip under her cousin's escort. Xulin took a glance at the battlefield before clicking the exit button. Did he notice me? That I was the one who shot him? Was the nod from me? When I was landing? Confusion cloaked her once more, without her even knowing why. The second day, Ye Chong resumed his daily training with a brand new perimeter to be cleared. This time, there was a different content in a different room. On the first day, it was still this perimeter that was crudely executed by Ye Chong, even though he was fully attentive. He was hard at work, absorbed in his training, that he did not see two uninvited guests approaching him. They had observed him for quite some time. Was that even the guy I knew from the battlefield yesterday? This guy that caused me anxiety? It was Xulin, whose mouth gaped large enough to fit in a hard-boiled egg as she watched on. She couldn't believe her eyes upon seeing that guy that was doing everything so clumsily. From an expert falling to an amateur again, even if this was conducted in the basic training field, it was still as shocking as a human eating an alien's, not to mention the training was something she had accomplished when she was about 8 to 9 years old. Yet, his performance was extremely uncoordinated. The shock in Xulin just skyrocketed from surely, to very, to immensely, and to extremely, and it was still multiplying. Hasn't he done his basic course? If he did, why is he still here? And doing it this badly? If he did not, how in the world could he execute expert only wavy steps? Beginner's luck? Is he hacking? The only conclusion that these clues could lead to was, this was really an oddity. Cousin Shou had her eyes fixed on that raven in training. In her eyes sparkled the biggest mystery of mankind, and of what she was thinking. The guy might have been unskillful, but he still had the attention from the two girls on the stand throughout the training. Hey, what? Shui, why are you still here? Are you going to do your training? Xulin managed to pull her eyes away and asked. Shui, the lass, was standing all upright, watching that man piloting his raven, while not even moving a muscle of her own. Don't tell me. You were frightened by the incident yesterday? Were you? This connected the circuit back in Cousin Shou's head, her face reddened right away. I'll do it right now. She tripped on her way to her raven. Likewise to her pilot tripping, the raven tripped a few times in the air as well, seemingly about to fall down again anytime soon. Don't worry, Shui, it's going to be alright, just calm down, I'm here, right here. In cold sweat she said. The raven was bewildered as it entered the field. "What's wrong, Shui?" Xulin asked, seeing the raven just hovering in the air. She then heard sniffs and sobs. "Xulin, I think I forgot everything I learned yesterday. ... Holding her forehead, Xulin breathed deeply. Those words were a strong fainting spell. Ye Chong, with his focus about all the meals he could possibly have for the following weeks, literally failed to notice the interesting sisters at the stands doing their titanic get. If the sisters were to come closer, they might have overheard the madness in the cabin of the training raven. "Meat. Meat. I need meat. Hand me the meat and no one gets hurt." Shang was such a stern and demanding teacher. Even Ye Chong's toes could tell that the training this time must be another bottomless trap hole of hell difficulty where he had to crawl out by clawing his way with his raven. He repeated his monotonous training and lost the sense of time. He only found his stomach grumbling inside him due to his hunger when Shang decided to give him a kind reminder of his dinner time. Exit. Ye Chong pressed, leaving the interesting sisters staring at the blank spot he left, astonished. Ever since then, it seemed to have become their additional routine to check the guy out daily. Of course, even a so-called incompetent greenhorn like Ye Chong would have noticed. Being alert anytime, anywhere was the survival sense ingrained in Ye Chong. But the two meshs were merely watching him from afar, hovering in the air quietly, with no other interference coming from them. He feigned ignorance. But still, he did not get it. The content of his training had nothing sophisticated, in fact, it was also minimal. Weren't they annoyed by it? It was none of his business anyway. He just continued training as they watched on. He told himself that if he did not work hard enough, the muddy pile of unknown substance would await him at the dining table when he got home. Liquid died for the next week. The trio never talked to each other, at most, they nodded at each other. Time passed and Ye Chong made a breakthrough in his training. He could manipulate 10 metal marbles at once for 1.5 hours continuously, along with his improved physique. He could feel the strength increasing with certainty. Speed-wise, he was 5 times faster, and strength-wise, he was 7 times stronger. As for reaction speed, he became 11 times faster compared to the past. The puzzling part of his development was that his weight had hardly increased. Even Shang did not expect this. By then, Ye Chong could already hunt simple creatures on his own without relying on any mech. He could prove his strength in this aspect. He was holding a thin blade in his right hand and a nicely roasted drumstick from the engulfer, as he swiftly sliced pieces of them with the blade while they formed circles as they fell. He gently picked them up with the point of his blade, and tossed them into his mouth. As he got faster and faster, it almost reached the point of a bazooka firing multiple slices of meat into his mouth. Ye Chong thoroughly enjoyed the sensation of such a feast. In the process, he discovered that if he could slice the meat thinner than ever, the scent of the grill could be retained while the texture would turn softer, like a heavenly touch on his tongue melting away into wonderful grease. The thinner the better. The drumstick shrunk over time, and soon after that, only a stalk of bone remained in his grip. It glowed brightly, looking clean as if it had been washed, wiped and waxed. He exhaled and tossed the bone away, stretching his back. All things listed in the basic course were completed yesterday. What is there for today? The training days seemed tough, yet it was more accomplishing than the days he had lived before. However, losing sight of his goal had made him dazed once again. And that was the time he recalled the SP2 and Raven he saw every time, hovering over the field. We didn't even speak. I just nodded when they nodded too. I wonder if we would ever meet again. A sense of longing suddenly grew in Ye Chong for the two strange yet familiar friends he made. I think I ought to tell them that I will no longer go to the training field tomorrow and war wait. Maybe not. Ye Chong decided against it right away. Friend? PFFT. What if we were just acquaintances? I guess I'm the one who has been thinking too much. We aren't from the same world in the end. Seems like it would be better to leave it just like this. If I were able to leave Trash Planet 12, maybe I would still stand a chance, but... Ye Chong started his wild imagination on the scenarios of the what-ifs if he did or did not befriend them officially. Shang on the other side of the room mumbled, "Practical. We are doing practicals. Gain some experience from it, then we can proceed to the more advanced courses." The answer from Shang was more exciting than the silly fantasies in Ye Chong's head, in which he ended instantly. "Practical? Alright. I love practical. Man, do you know how boring it is to train all day and night?" After training all this while, he could finally obtain the opportunity to flaunt his moves. Ye Chong looked forward to his practical day with much enthusiasm. Hi. This is Novel Admire. Thanks for the visit. Chapter 11, Against a God. Ye Chong stared at the mech before him, thoughts racing through his mind. Here was a 10-meter tall humanoid mech, armed with a silver shield on its left shoulder that glistened like mercury under the soft interior lighting. The fire saber wielded by its right hand was a flame shaped into a weapon. Its gray body was elegant, and the golden ornaments on its forehead were a stunning addition to its appearance. This was obviously a modified mech. Its dual-axle shield functions at above average compared to other accessories, but his Raven's magnetic sword would barely be able to scratch it. Although the fire saber was a medium-level weapon, it would probably only take a few hits to cleave the Raven in half. A strike on a weak point of his mech would be fatal. The mech's body structure was well designed for defending against attacks, and its good weight distribution avoided overloading the mech's engine. There were also a few weapons for long-range attacks. This was a brilliant creation. Ye Chong realized as he examined the mech thoroughly. If Ye Chong were to judge this mech, he would summarize it in one word: graceful. Despite being equipped with various mid-level accessories, a well-rounded pilot could do plenty of damage with it. Ye Chong believed its engine was probably either a Parham or a Swordfish 4, for only these two engine models could bring out the best of the mech and its accessories. A mech that could do well in both attack and defense, which was also armed with long-ranged and short-ranged attacks, would be a formidable opponent. Ye Chong found it hard to believe that he would meet such a strong opponent in his first battle. However, Ye Chong was not troubled by negative emotions such as fear and worry. Life on the trash planet made him realize that the types of enemies he battled was beyond his control. There was only one concern: how to defeat the enemy. Ye Chong wanted to use his ray guns, but even a direct hit would hardly be a threat to the enemy. What about alloy daggers? Oh dear, the daggers would surely yield under the opponent's sturdy structure. He thought to himself. Fortunately, all hope was not lost, for his magnetic sword could withstand some damages, though it would take 3 strikes on the same spot to break the mech's armor, which would be a great difficulty. Ye Chong mused at the thought. Ye Chong analyzed the mech for its weaknesses. He had learned from experience that no adversary was perfect. A well-aimed strike at the most vulnerable spot would tip the scales in battle, and that was the key to winning against stronger opponents. Undoubtedly, the throat was the most vulnerable spot in the majority of humanoid mechs due to the presence of high density of photon nodes. Even a little damage could cause the mech to malfunction, and the neck's extremely bulky armor greatly reduced its flexibility. Others would find the throat an awkward position to defend against, with the exception of heavily armed mechs. However, that was common knowledge amongst mech pilots, therefore it would be expected to find the throat carefully guarded. Ye Chong eventually dismissed this approach. As for the pilot's cabin, it will be a no-brainer that pilots would not leave themselves exposed. Unlike the throat, a humanoid mech's pilot cabin is located at its chest area where the armor is thickest. Even if Ye Chong managed to burst through the cabin area with his magnetic sword, it would take at least a dozen strikes to damage the armor. The odds of him surviving so many close-range attacks with the fire saber wielded by his opponent did not look promising. What now? Ye Chong grew desperate in planning his strategies. But time waits for no man, With the soft ring of the bell, the battle began. Ye Chong cleared his mind and focused on his opponent. Jeb sat casually in his mech, smiling mesmerizingly under his aquiline nose. His golden hair was naturally wavy, much like a prince from a fairy tale. His posture was elegant, and his movements majestic. His intense brown eyes studied the raven with a hint of sneer. Jeb scoffed, "Truly, one does not learn to fear what one does not understand. How dare you challenge my dear Apollo with a raven? Ah, looks like yours truly will have to teach you a lesson." The scorn in his tone was apparent. Jeb decided to give Ye Chong a little lecture. When the countdown of the battle ended, he charged straight for the raven with his prized Apollo. He did not bother to activate the mech's shooting systems, or his dual-axle shield. The raven remained static as though surrendering to its fate, awaiting for a fatal blow. "Ah, what a poor and unlucky fellow! A battle with yours truly was your greatest misfortune," Jeb mocked. These days, Jeb was not feeling exactly cheery, and this battle served as an opportunity to vent off his displeasures. "I shouldn't finish him off so soon," Jeb snickered darkly. As both opponents closed in on one another, Jeb whipped out his fire saber, the flames flickering menacingly, as it yearns for damage. Jeb anticipated for his opponent to be outright panicking and flustering. As the raven's wings received a heavy blow from his attack, the game of cat and mouse finally commenced. Jeb smiled wickedly, delighted with the destruction. The game has only just begun, Jeb thought pleasingly. There was no shooting involved despite being the fastest and safest strategy against his raven, which confuses Ye Chong. Jeb's mech closed in slowly, and Ye Chong thought it was odd. If his opponent chose a close-ranged battle, why not take advantage of the mech's speed? As the mech's fire saber attacked his left wing, Ye Chong was even more confused. Why ignore vulnerable spots of the raven to unnecessarily strike at a left wing? Even the dual-axle shield was not utilized, leaving its chest defenseless. The fire saber's attack was also more style than substance, the quivering flames only for show, the attack itself weak and badly angled. Thoughts raced through his mind as he contemplated about reasons behind these forms of attack. Ye Chong was bewildered, thinking that a pilot armed with such marvels was making absurd ambushes. Regardless, Ye Chong was presented with a golden opportunity, and he would not miss it. The raven instantaneously accelerated, reaching its maximum speed as Ye Chong sidestepped, dodging the fire saber effortlessly. His magnetic sword hooked upwards at an angle and scraped past the enemy, leaving a gash of 5 centimeters deep and was about 1 meter long across the enemy's hull. The gash stood out like a condescending smirk. Before the enemy could retaliate, the raven took advantage of its momentum and aimed its left wing at the opponent's chest. The two meshes met at high speed, and with a loud bang they clashed and bounced off each other awkwardly to the sides. Ye Chong was prepared for the high-speed collision, and maneuvered away with ease. His basic training had taught him how to handle collisions, and Shang's strict coaching regimen allowed him to decide where to land right when the current collision occurred. Ye Chong adjusted the controls with astounding swiftness, and the raven's 12 secondary engines located along its sides roared to life like music to his ears, angling the mech with precision. He managed to power up in split seconds. All 12 secondary engines rumbled and sank, the raven, now 20 centimeters from the ground, paused slightly in midair, as the claws on its right limb flexed out and its wings angled accordingly. The raven sprang off the ground like a graceful raptor, and headed back for the skies. The black mech flew along a graceful arc, and at the peak of its parabolic trajectory was the Apollo, still recovering from the collision. Even as an entry-level mech, the raven's maximum speed was not to be underestimated. In a blink of an eye, the raven was already at Apollo's tail. Jeb was still dazed and unresponsive from the collision, and Apollo was left without its pilot. Its throat came into view, and Ye Chong locked in on his opponent's most vulnerable spot like a predator ready to pounce on its prey. Ye Chong howled in anticipation, and thrust his magnetic sword with breathtaking speed into Apollo's throat, much like a knight of ancient times charging with his lance at full speed towards the enemy's throat. The force of the lunge greatly exceeded Ye Chong's expectations as the Apollo was flung far across the battlefield like a puppet, its thick-set neck now barely intact, and the photon circuits all jumbled up. The seemingly impossible victory was overcome almost by instinct. Ye Chong had won. Chapter 12, Onwards and Upwards. His opponent asked for a rematch, but Ye Chong ignored him. The way he saw it, the deliberate mistakes committed by his adversary would have cost his life a dozen times, and what Ye Chong needed was an expert that could sharpen his skills to grow stronger, not a brazen fool like him. Shang swiftly appeared by his side. Not a bad performance, but the opponent was pathetic. Ye Chong nodded in agreement. Shang asked, however, it seems that the Raven can no longer keep up with your battle skills. Are you interested in using another mech? Ye Chong beamed at Shang's suggestions. A new mech? What model? What are your thoughts on the Apollo? Shang inquired. Ye Chong speculated before replying, it's alright. It's pretty agile with thoughtful modifications. You win points for every victory in battle, and these points can be traded for new meshes or accessories at the maintenance hub, as mech modifications are allowed here. Of course, I advise that you refrain from using modified meshes for now even though you are not entirely new to it. My suggestion would be for you to get familiar with various meshes before exploring the options offered by modifications. Shang explained. Shang barely finished his little speech before Ye Chong headed straight for the maintenance hub. The spacious main hall exhibited a great variety of meshes, and Ye Chong eyed the displays like an eagle as he wandered around the displayed meshes, occasionally petting or caressing the machines, unable to hide his excitement. Ye Chong instantly realized that every mech was labeled with the amount of points required for redemption. He fumbled with his phone scrolling through his incoming messages and finally found what he was looking for, 1,000 points under his name. Ye Chong heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Green Wolf mech offered 2 models, and each only cost 300 points. Looks like I have quite a number of points. Ye Chong thought gleefully. Ye Chong decided to heed Shang's advice as was never one for thoughtless opinions. Even though he eyed the other meshes longingly, his decision was finalized. He decided on a sophisticated Green Wolf eye. The Green Wolf was a quadruped, built very much like a wolf, with a double-bladed lightsaber held in its mouth. Both sides of the weapon are capable of activating laser sabers of half a meter long. The Green Wolf model was a classic mech for land battles, although it lacked the Raven's wings, rendering flight impossible, and its engines were not designed for optimum performance in space. On land, however, the mech's powerful drive, agile movements and commensurate speed made it a popular model. Compared to the Raven, the Green Wolf came with quite a few upgrades. Shang appeared like a spirit before Ye Chong, and threw a quick glance at the Green Wolf behind him before commenting in earnest, "'Tis an alliance between beasts." Ye Chong glared back at Shang. "You dare compare me to a beast?" Shang replied lazily, "Are you not one?" "Of course I'm not." Ye Chong defiantly sulked. "Then what are you?" Shang retorted. Ye Chong declared shamelessly, "I am the king of beasts." Shang was flabbergasted, and couldn't help but surrender and roll its eyes. "Definitely like a beast." Ye Chong stood proudly with his arms akimbo, and the background music began to play the roar of 1,000 beasts. The music changed abruptly, replaced by the raucous cries of beasts having sex. Ye Chong felt goosebumps all over him, and immediately begged Shang for mercy. Shang chuckled, and reasoned languidly, "But you are the king of beasts. Ye Chong pulled a face. Shang tossed a name list to Ye Chong. "The names recorded here are those who have a winning rate of over 90%, and had registered for training here within the last 3 months. You should challenge them one at a time. Oh, and do remember to start from the last one on the list." Sun Xuelin and Ziyu stared at the empty training ground in dismay. Ziyu announced flatly, "Xuelin, he's not here." Inside the raven's cabin, tears began to flow down her delicate contour. Xulin was enraged. That bastard, he's crossed the line. We've known each other for so long, how can he just up and left without so much as a goodbye? This is too much. I'm going to give him a real beating the next time we meet. She had completely forgotten her losing track record against Ye Chong. Let's check out the battlegrounds, Xulin said as she grabbed Xiyu by the arm. They searched the battle areas one by one, but there was neither a sight of the Raven, nor the one who piloted it. They were not aware of Ye Chong replacing the Raven for another mech, and were also ignorant of the fact that he had left the battle area for Disa right before their arrival on the battlegrounds. Hey! Young man, what are you up to these days? Haven't seen you in a while. An elderly man greeted Ye Chong as he was on his way to Dista. Ye Chong gave a slight bow. Grandpa Zhu, how do you do? My schedule's a little hectic with training these days, hence the absence. The elderly named Zhu was someone Ye Chong respected dearly, for he was an old engineer who was generous with his teachings, and Ye Chong had benefited much from the old man. Grandpa Zhu chortled, this old man is doing quite well, and this young man here is still as polite as always. What a nice lad, them old folks must be happy to see you there. Well then, I must be off, you enjoy yourself, young man. Ye Chong smiled bashfully. I will, have a good day, Grandpa Zhu. Ye Chong visited the central hub of an association in Dista called Aurora. The association was infamous, its members consisting mainly of retired mech engineers and pilots of high stature with great knowledge on all things mech. The conglomeration of these individuals was a force to reckon with. Many existing companies consulted with them for their renowned expertise. The eccentricities of the association's members were also well known, where each member offered a unique set of skills and experience. The fact that the members retired with enviable pensions made financial rewards ineffective as a means of gaining their assistance. If they find someone amenable, they would offer help even if unasked for. If one is unpleasant, even a shipload of gold would not change their minds. Their disregard for money was always a cause of concern by various companies. However, the stakes were high, so the superiors have to lower their sights and dance to the members' peculiar tunes, while secretly cursing them for their humiliation. It did not help that most Aurora members were well versed in the art of politics and negotiations. The company executives who were used to taking advantage of others had found their match. Chapter 13, A Kind of Peace. Ye Chong was the only Aurora member under the age of 50. His membership was the result of an accident. In one of his early days in the virtual world, Ye Chong entered the Aurora's central hub by accident. However, none of the members paid him any attention, as they were either engrossed in some group discussion or conducting their own research. Ye Chong, driven by curiosity, approached the noisiest group in the room, and was surprised to find that they were discussing the piping designs for mech engines. Ye Chong was very much interested, and soon became absorbed with the discussion at hand. There were two old men who proposed two different design solutions, and both were stubbornly defending their own positions. Ye Chong was reminded of Shang's engine schematics, and inadvertently spoke up, suggesting an entirely new approach. Suddenly, the group went very quiet. The two factions were speechless, as they stared in surprise at the young newcomer that appeared out of the blue. Ye Chong yelped. That was how Ye Chong was introduced to the elderly group, and one of them eventually came up with the idea of accepting Ye Chong as a member of Aurora. This won the immediate approval from almost everyone, and Ye Chong did not get a chance to say anything before being taken into their fold. And so, Ye Chong unexpectedly became a member of Aurora. Ye Chong was not entirely happy with the outcome. He had always thought that he had inherited most of his papa's skill and knowledge, and was somewhat confident with his expertise in mechanical modifications, but here in Aurora, everyone was at least a few levels above him, and that was a hard fact to swallow. Unwilling to lag behind, Ye Chong upped his game and began the long and hard journey of further educating himself. No matter which field he studied, These old-timers had ensured that it was thoroughly explored and well-researched, leaving a large gap for him to catch up. Fortunately for Ye Chong, who had a solid foundation in these fields, could absorb and adapt the resources around him like a hungry whirlpool. In time, Ye Chong's innate talent, impeccable learning skills, and solid foundation were noticed by the other members. These old men have had their moments of glory, enjoying prestigious reputations in their own expertise, but many of them were without a predecessor of choice, because a good student was hard to come by. Over time, they grew interested in Ye Chong, as if he was the one they were all waiting for. They welcomed his questions, and let him in on many of their latest findings, further adding to the list of things Ye Chong had to catch up with. However, Ye Chong continued his studies with unhindered curiosity, and this gained the approval of his seniors. In the end, Ye Chong became Aurora's one and only apprentice, and a shared one at that. He entered into the hub, and the old-timers all came up to him. "Ah, isn't this our young lad? Haven't seen you in a few days, did you get to understand the formula I taught you last time? You didn't? No matter, we can still look at it from a different perspective." For example, the voice was interrupted by another angry one. "You old fool, don't keep annoying our young lad with questions, if you drive him nuts, I'll hold you accountable." The same voice continued, "Hey young lad, come on here, let me see if you've grown taller." "Oh, still the same old, eh? Nothing to worry about, the human body is only flesh and bones, but it's your character and knowledge that matters most. I have a few papers here that I've been working on these past few years, you can have a look at them when you're free." "Huh, old do, what an ingenious approach. How could I have not thought of that? I should start compiling my own work too." The elderly named-do was smiling with delight, exceedingly pleased with himself. Ye Chong, however, stood amongst the elderly, with the info chip from Do in hand, thrown off by the conversational exchanges. Inside, there was an extravagantly decorated dwelling room. Jeb's handsome facial features wore a twisted expression, as though a noble and graceful lord had transformed into a horrifying demon. Damn it, today's loss was completely unexpected. Jeb recalled how his gloating act must seem like a clown's clumsy performance in the eyes of his opponent, and his anger stoked into a flaming rage. The series of unfortunate events that befell him these past few days had stretched his endurance to the maximum, and Jeb could not take it anymore. He flung his virtual world hyperlink into the intricately patterned carpet, breaking the device into pieces. Just the thought of the imposter made Jeb see red. How he cursed and cursed the damned bastard. This is not the end. Definitely not. Jeb howled inaudibly in his mind. I, the magnificent Jeb, cannot possibly lose to a scum like that. I will make him pay for this, I'll kill him, that's right. I'll kill him. By then, Jeb was far from rational, his eyes bloodshot from his manic state. Jeb could not help but laugh as he imagined his opponent begging for mercy under his sword. A few minutes later, Jeb finally cooled down and regained his composure and grace. He grabbed the comms device from the table and imperiously summoned, "Butler Caillou, get over here." A professional-looking man gave a fist-rapping salute and a slight bow before Jeb. This was his family's butler, Caillou. Jeb spoke through gritted teeth, "Butler Caillou, find out everything about the NR Training Center's pilot registered under the name. I want to know everything about him, understand? Everything." The butler's lowered eyes darkened for a moment. Whoever this is, they must have angered the reckless young master. He knew well enough that his young master was good only in his looks, as he was always uninterested in learning, frequently engaged with idle sport and had the bitter peculiarity of never leaving insults unavenged. Those who offended him never end up well, and many have suffered as a result. Caillou sighed deeply, someone will suffer again this time. But superficially, he exaggerated an obedient "yes, sir," and accepted his orders with due courtesy, for he would not dare to offend the young master for fear of losing his job. Moreover, the current situation was an opportunity for him, if appropriately handled. It's not too hard to please someone like Jeb, simply acting like the perfect servant would keep him happy, unlike dealing with his elder brother, the eldest young master. Caillou suppressed a shiver from thinking about the cunning man and his impenetrable thoughts. Jeb was satisfied with his butler's response, for he derived his sense of superiority from those of lower stature. Contented, he waved the butler away with pretentious grace. He, you little fool, I'll get to you yet, and let you realize the horrible consequences of offending yours truly. Jeb tipped his wine glass and sipped on 3 centuries-old naturally brewed red wine. He studied the glass intently, his thoughts unknown to anyone, save for himself. The crimson drink glowed softly under the dim lighting, radiating an ominous, bloody aroma that promised certain death. Chapter 14, Unraveling Secrets. Angel evaded the seemingly random traps and the wandering electrically activated mines very carefully. HMPH, so what if they're the MPA? He managed to slip into their internal system after all, as if the place was left unguarded. Angel was secretly pleased with himself. Today, photon processors offered more and more capabilities for mechs, one could even say that it was the mech's most important component. The MPA may give the impression of consisting mainly of mech pilots, but the association had enlisted a wide range of other experts related to mechs. Amongst the ranks, the Mavericks number quite a few. While Angel was generally capable, entering the MPA's interior ground was still a feat he was quite proud of. However, it would not do to be careless here, for dangers lurked around every possible corner, and if his presence alerted the Mavericks who served as guards for the area, escape will be more than difficult. This was a crucial job. If he succeeded, the pay will be enough to support his spending spree for a good while. Angel knew that there were other Mavericks who received the same offer, and that made him eager to prove himself to be a cut above the rest. The portal before Angel emitted a bright rainbow-colored spectrum. Steam escaped through the cracks, as though the portal would lead to a fairyland. Angel suspiciously eyed the portal. As a Maverick with more than a few years under his belt, Angel came to realize that a dazzling appearance was often a cover for a potentially fatal trap. Angel bent down to reach for the floor with his right hand, and closed his eyes, and an almost faint ripple spread out from where he stood. This was one of Angel's 2 unique skills, called the ripple. Every Maverick had their own unique skills, and these skills represent the Maverick's attainment and achievement in their respective fields. Ripple was Angel's. It was used to scan the surroundings without triggering sensors or traps, and could even be undetectable by other Mavericks. The skill was a complementary addition to his trap-setting expertise, and his skill set made him an excellent choice for clandestine jobs. Other Mavericks may have attributed his past successes to his excellent intuition on traps and their locations, but it was all a cover for his true skill. His other unique skill would be epiphyte. Like the eponymous group of organisms, epiphyte would not harm its target, but once activated, it would cling on tightly to the target till Angel allowed otherwise. It was a very reliable skill, and efficient for tracking. Angel's reputation was largely built on these 2 skills. Angel focused on the feedback from his ripple. 1, 2. Angel counted silently to 8. 8 tiers. What stroke of luck, to have an 8-tiered security barrier. Angel did a double take on the situation, sensing something was possibly amiss. Without absolute certainty, Angel did not dare to make his next move. Instead, he went through his memories meticulously. That's not right. He finally figured out what gave rise to his uneasiness. On his way in, he would not have avoided all those concealed traps without his ripple. The MPA's hired Mavericks were good, so it would be illogical for the security barrier to be easier to break than the earlier security measures. An 8-tiered security barrier may not be simple to hack, but for a Maverick who could venture this far into the MPA's domain, it would seem like child's play. Angel concluded decisively, there must be some other hidden trick. Right. That must be it. Angel closed his eyes and activated ripple again, calmly analyzing the feedback with care. It took 30 minutes, but Angel finally reopened his eyes and exhaled slowly in relief. What astonishing programming! While the barrier appeared to 8-tiered, each tier was connected to the others based on some intricate principles, effectively creating an extra tier of security, which meant there were actually 9 tiers. If one had hacked through the barriers through usual means, it would surely have triggered a trap. Astounding! What an astounding way of linking between security tiers! His first ever encounter with such mechanism, and he had nearly fell for it. He thanked his lucky stars for being extra careful. While the security barrier was complex, Angel had managed a good grasp of its inner workings, and felt reasonably confident. However, as he began hacking, a green shadow flashed past his vision, catching him off guard. What was that? Angel, who was very much surprised, stopped his hacking. The portal before him was still glowing brightly, painting a rainbow hue over his surroundings. Was the green flicker an illusion? Angel was uncertain. As he studied his surroundings carefully with the hopes of finding the source of that green flash, the portal's bright, colorful glow greatly inhibited his search. In the end, he found nothing. Perhaps it was really an illusion? Angel was unsure. If only the portal would stop glowing. Angel started. That's right, why is the portal glowing? Could it be? Could it be a means to hide something? Angel thought it through and began to see the sense in his reasoning. He avoided making sudden movements, and merely scanned his surroundings. And there it was. Angel nearly went blind with the searching, but he could now see the dim green flash. It was a thin sliver of green light, concealed by the portal's brighter glow. It was concealed, even after using his ripple detection. It was a first for Angel, and he could not help admiring the masterpiece. However, since he had found it, then Angel gave the mysterious portal another look, in his eyes, which mirrored a fair maiden's bear, beckoning him with open arms. Butler Caillou began respectfully, "Second young master, regarding your orders last time, there have been some developments." Jeb was overjoyed. "Really? Where's he from? His real name? Ha ha, he will not get away this time." He sobered, and continued ruthlessly. He, your offense against me has doomed you." Caillou had more to say, but was obviously hesitant. Jeb noticed and frowned, displeased. "Come on, just spill it. Could it be that he is from a family of high standing?" The butler bowed a little. "That's not it, it's just that." "Well." Jeb grew impatient. "Just tell it as it is, none of this nonsense." Caillou grew nervous. "Young master, after you ordered for this information, I had hired a few capable mavericks to investigate. While the training center's security was commendable, they still managed to bypass it and access an information archives. It's just that. The whole thing looks suspicious." "Suspicious?" Jeb inquired. Caillou grew increasingly edgy, as he knew that the second young master before him was quite temperamental. With the current delicate balance within the family, he must always be on his guard, for any error on his part would have disastrous consequences. If the matter at hand was not satisfyingly handled, the second young master might throw a tantrum, and that would spell punishment, or even his expulsion from the Luo family. Caillou, who was careful in nature, dreaded the possibilities ahead. He replied shortly, "Yes, in the information archives, we searched through all of the IDs, but could not find this character, not even one with a similar name." Jeb was stunned. "Not even one? That's impossible. I saw it, clear as day. It must be right." Caillou maneuvered through the conversation smoothly. "Of course, this servant believes in the young master's sharp eyes, you could not have possibly seen it wrong." Seeing Jeb preening as expected, he continued, "But that's what's so suspicious about this, why would there be no records of him in the archives? Access to the virtual world requires identification of some sort, it would have been impossible otherwise." Jeb began to realize the situation clearly. "That's it, This is impossible. Caillou continued, this servant was thinking, perhaps she is a maverick too? Jed beamed and followed his logic. That's right. Ha! That must be it. Only mavericks could do something like this. Mavericks were people who could bypass limitations set in the virtual world through their skills in using photon processors. They were talented specialists of these processors, and so had an unimaginable advantage over the average person in the virtual world. Caillou continued, and so this servant thought, one would need to fight fire with fire. This servant has entrusted a few mavericks associated with the Wu family to investigate his background. Jed prodded impatiently. And what have you found about his background? The butler's expression grew even stranger. Translator's note, MPA stands for Mech Pilots Association. Chapter 15, Mavericks. Angel was disturbed. The last mission went perfectly well, considering that out of the 5 mavericks that were sent, he alone managed to deliver, while the others failed with the final portal. Just the thought of solving that remarkable trap brightened Angel's mood, and the edges of his mouth lifted a little. The mission was, honestly, quite a challenge, but Angel found the reward too high to resist. Such a high pay, besides, this was not the first time he served the Wu family, and they had been reliable clients. Most importantly, the job was practically made for someone like him. The Wu family was interested in someone, and with such a lucrative reward, Angel could only imagine the person to be someone of high standing, or a skillful mech pilot they might be considering to hire. While he had a few good guesses, nothing prepared him for the truth. There were no records whatsoever on the so-called character in the information archive. If he had not copied some of the records to show the Wu family, they might not even believe that he made it into the system. When Angel accepted the fact that the archives had nothing on Ye, he felt a sense of fear. What if he was also a maverick? The thought had haunted Angel ever since the mission. While mavericks were just like any other person in the real world, they became obvious outcasts in the virtual world. Here, they were not bound by the same rules that govern the average user, instead, they were powerful, and in the eyes of others, almost invincible. But was that indeed so? Angel smiled ironically as he thought of those rumors. There were many unwritten rules for mavericks, placing a huge restriction on most of them. This was even more so for independent mavericks who had no specific allegiance, and Angel was one such maverick. One of the rules that Angel observed strictly was to avoid taking on missions that involve other mavericks. There was no real way to compare the strength between mavericks, as each had their own field of specialty. Even within the same field, a beginner with remarkable ingenuity might best an experienced opponent. After all, creativity could work miracles. Angel was not interested in battles between mavericks. Usually, a user is hyperlinked to the virtual world via electromagnetic wave stimulation of neural signals in the brain, which creates a resonance between the brain waves and the virtual world. While hacking into the hyperlink device proves difficult, it was not entirely impossible. Angel once witnessed a rival pair of exceptional mavericks engage in a fierce battle, and it ended with the loser brain dead. This was the first time he realized the extent of a maverick's capabilities and the harshness of the virtual world. Fortunately, mavericks who could push past this final barrier were few and far between, and represented the cream of the crop. Most of them understood the weight of their powers and would not use them carelessly. They even took the extra step of binding each other to a set of rules far stricter than for the average maverick to curb atrocities in the virtual world. Never offend a maverick, however weak one may seem to be. Perusing the facilities of the NR training center without proper registration did not seem like the acts of a lesser maverick, if he or she was indeed one. Angel felt fear spreading deep within, for he dreaded enraging another maverick, and possibly one that was much stronger than him. But the matter was not over. The Wu family had entrusted him with another mission, to find out his true history. It could be anything, like an address, or a name. The mission came with the expected extravagant price tag offered by his client. All things said, Angel felt that he should not refuse the offer. The Wu family had been his main client, and they had gotten familiar with each other. Besides, this offer was similarly suitable for a maverick of his skill, and the return was more than acceptable. It was the highest price he had ever been offered. But Angel was still hesitant. What if the opponent was in fact the most powerful maverick? Angel knew himself very well. He was like a mole, quick to identify hidden traps, but disadvantaged in a direct encounter. If this character was a maverick, he would have to prepare for the possibility of being a target of revenge. If the last mission was a small offense, this mission would cross the line. The greatest fear of a maverick was to have one's real identity exposed. In the real world, a maverick is as vulnerable as anyone else. Without the ability to defend oneself, losing anonymity would inevitably lead to losing one's freedom, and possibly, one's life. Angel dared not accept the current mission lightly. His mind was still clear, not too affected by the Wu family's excessiveness. He understood that accepting it might lead to a struggle with a powerful maverick that would only end with death, or even a joint attack by other mavericks, considering the fact that what he was about to do was a huge taboo for their kind. But still he could not decide. The sky-high financial reward was very, very persuasive. Just this one mission would support him comfortably for the next decade. Angel had a 70% confidence level of doing what needed to be done without the target noticing, for his epiphyte had never failed him before. This mission is really giving me a headache. Angel sighed as he massaged his temples. He should refuse it, but the money, the temptation. He should accept it, but what if he could not live long enough to enjoy his reward? Suddenly, Angel had an epiphany. Why not meet this character and assess his mettle before deciding? Based on intel from the Wu family, Angel arrived at the NR training center, disguised as a tourist. Once there, he found his target shortly. Seemed to be just finished with a battle, heading outwards with his mech. Angel began to trail him, interested to know who this actually was. Amongst the passers-by, seemed to blend in. Suddenly, Angel noticed something, and did a double take. Mavericks. The people who just passed by, they were all mavericks. Angel could feel the cogwheels in his head turning. It must be that some other mavericks had accepted the job. The Wu family had always preferred to hire a few mavericks for tougher missions. Based on the aura of those few, they certainly must be. Are they planning to do something here and now? Angel decided to stay aside and observe. After all, he should take the opportunity of investigating without getting personally involved. Angel focused silently, and his ripple began to spread outwards, informing him of all the details of his surroundings in great clarity. Well done. They're indeed masters of their trade, picking the perfect opening, and moving almost imperceptibly in the background. Angel felt great admiration towards these mavericks. They were experts, and worked together seamlessly like second nature. The sight was one to behold. But what happened next made Angel's blood froze. That moment was one that would stick with him forever. Chapter 16, Abyssal Rule. Ye Chong exited the battlefield on his knees in exhaustion. Man, that was one annoying guy. Are there even cubs in the jungle? Why was everyone on the list prepared by Mew felt like they were on steroids or something? They were so tough that one couldn't win without losing a tooth or two. While Ye Chong was consumed in his thoughts of his battle, something was brewing. Yi! Look out! Mew Shang's voice rang in Ye Chong's head, like a bell. What is it? He looked around, tensed. There are 4 mavericks identified nearby. One located at the corner, identity unknown. A hologram of an overview of the area appeared before Ye Chong with locations of the unknown individuals marked by Mew Shang, mavericks. What is that? Ye Chong questioned in curiosity. Currently it is not possible to make a clear and concise explanation here. We will talk about this when we get back. We are not aware of their intentions too. Stealthily, the mavericks surrounded Ye Chong. He could not tell if they did it intentionally or not, and as he lifted his leg slowly stepping to the right, they moved in sync as well, maintaining a circular orbit around him. Ye Chong's brows furrowed and sighed in frustration as he put his fingers down on the control panel, ready to launch an attack anytime. Ye. We are under attack. Do we strike back? Beeped Mu Shang. Even though Ye Chong could not see Mu Shang from the cabin, he still rolled his eyes and snorted, duh. Of course we are striking back. What else are we going to do? Even rats would counterattack with their fangs, so are we waiting here to rot away with time? Oh. Mu Shang flatly responded, I see. Angel's eyes glistened in anticipation, scrutinizing every detail surrounding her. Waves crashing in a unique rhythm, Angel's acute sense of sight picks up surrounding features such as the needle on clock at the lobby that struck at 9:32. Oblivious of what was happening, he made no moves since he was not able to sense any apparent danger. On the other hand, an expert with keen eyes like Angel was aware of the situation he was in. It was evident that the Mavericks had placed a surge seeker on. It only needed a few seconds for the device to link with the system of the target, and by then it would be too late for them to discover and eliminate it. Everyone in the galaxy would have access to Ye's database. The only effective way to tackle the surge seeker is to avoid it, but as soon as it is attached on you, the fun begins. The debate here would be, could he be just another commoner? Angel scoffed in disgust at a ridiculous pay by the Wu family to effortlessly wipe out a commoner like Ye. Tension rumbled at the pit of Angel's stomach with regret. While he could have finished off with a few strikes and received that handsome pay, he decided to monitor the victim from afar. He was certain that even his bone eater would outperform the outdated surge seeker easily. Just when Angel started to drown in remorse, the situation changed dramatically on the battlefield. A screeching cry can be heard that brings chill down your spine. Angel's lips were moving inarticulately, but no words could be heard. A formless pressure crushed Angel, his body was locked and stuck as if imprisoned in a grip by an invisible hand. No limbs can be moved except for his befuddled thoughts. Angel could not budge as all eyes were fixed on Ye. Time seemed to have frozen in place like a three-dimensional projected hologram, a one-of-a-kind disturbing stillness. Angel struggled as he choked out words but failed as the space had turned into a vacuum with no medium but dead silence. Angel's pupils filled with the deepest fear, his mind thrashing like dark vines creeping up all over one's body. He made no further moves, other than a cold stare plastered on his face. Angel's heart felt colder than an iceberg in a snowfield. He panicked as realization sunk into him that Ye was looking right into his soul. He moaned internally at his awaited doom. Ye's stare impaled the heart like a glacial spike, breaking through the fragile sense of security, obliterating all hopes and sheer coldness. Angel closed his eyes as he begged for mercy. Please. In a blink of an eye, the field changed again. A black hole was formed as it swallowed into an abyss that could bring forth the darkest fear of any individuals. Slowly, it engulfed everything nearby. Soon, Angel too was mercilessly sucked in by this dark force. The eyes detected nothing but darkness as Angel lost consciousness. Angel gently peeled open his eyes. He sat up thunderstruck by the encounter just a while ago. It felt like it was a dream that only lasted a brief second and he's back to reality. Was the abyss part of the dream or was it something else? Angel questioned but dared not figure it out. He glanced at the clock. 9:35. It has only been 3 seconds? Recollecting the sequence of events, Ye had already vanished into thin air, but it was only 3 seconds and he had already escaped. Angel was absolutely sure that Ye was there. There was no way a man could run that fast. Angel walked away and instantaneously he saw the 4 Mavericks from before who had been there in the same posture and position much like a sculpture. Something was not right. Angel held his steps as the waves wavered and his hands spread between them, but no anomaly was found. After a few hours, the Mavericks still remained as sculpture-like. No words were uttered while a passerby was amazed by such lively-looking sculptures in the area. Angel wanted to have a closer look, so he blended in with the pedestrians and walked towards the sculptures. Pale and lifeless. Those were the words Angel thought upon seeing their faces. A frantic sharp ringing in his head made Angel anxious. A face of such kind was not new to him. This is the second time he had experienced this particular symptom. The first time was during the aftermath of two defeated Ultimate Mavericks in a battle. Their souls were completely drained due to brain neural damage. It was the exact kind of face he saw. He shuddered and trembled in fear, feeling the chills up his spine as he choked on his saliva. The drought in his throat froze his movements. It was not a dream. Ever-expanding black hole, constant coldness, deafening silence, everything came crashing down and circulating through his mind as he picked up the pieces. The feeling was disturbing and frightening. Angel could not endure it any longer as he let out a shriek and disconnected right after. So. Mew, what is this maverick you had been mumbling about? How is it that I had never heard of it? Mavericks are the experts in utilizing processors at the virtual world with special abilities. They are known as the ones in the gray area, for they stand between life and death. The black and white could be both benign and malignant. Hence, the name. Mavericks denote the field they hold expertise in, so much it felt like a walk in the park. Ye Chong had lost his interests at the mention of processors. Is it? I don't really care about some processor professor in the field, so what happened to them anyway? Permanent neurological brain damage. Permanent neurological. What? What do you mean? It's a state that would eventually lead to either death or dementia. Ye Chong raised his brows. Oh, very well. Then they will be obedient as ever. At Trash Planet 12, if a man showed mercy to his enemies, he would be as good as the skeletons on the floor. He would be nothing more than bones on the ground. Ye Chong had already gotten used to a life of fight or perish, so death was nothing new to him. Oh wait. He turned to Shang. Isn't there another guy in the corner? Chapter 17, that guy. Shang sneered, you'll know by then. This fight was no other than a walk in the park, like a stone skimming across the water, one ripple after another with no huge impact. On a more important note, Ye Chong had fallen in love with the life he had gotten, which was filled with entertainment and adventure. He had never felt so accomplished before. It was like he was born ready to battle with various classes of people with different missions. The contentment of his life made him giddy with excitement. Ye Chong would head to the streets of Gista for a stroll and talk to the elders there to pass his free time. Besides that, he would also carry on with his ever-changing courses of training after he has finished his virtual world punching session on a daily basis. Compared to the days occupied by scavenging for food and defeating mutants on Trash Planet 12, the current way of life is more fitting for an active and healthy teenager like Ye Chong. As for the trainings on the list Mew gave, he had already crossed out more than half of them by now. Ye Chong never knew how prominent his image was throughout the galaxy for a hermit he once was. The fighter, who never rests on his laurels, had defeated one opponent after another. It had become the talk of the town among the NR trainees at the FMPA ever since his glorious battle with the Shield of Thorns. Shield of Thorns was known as the one whom piloted Mech Lorcupine, which was ranked at 82 in the FMPA offensive forces, notorious for possessing both skills and strength, and had gained tons of fans with his distinctive style of fighting. The battle ring was always flooded with spectators if he was in the battlefield. A man so great was in the end defeated by Ye Chong with a final blow to the head. Despite the impressive triumph, everyone thought there was nothing extraordinary about the battle. Any individual would have to face defeat one day, with no exceptions to the top fighter in Impa, the Son of Light, who averagely gets knocked out around 10 times a year. Therefore, the Shield of Thorns must have some breaks in his consecutive victories. What was astounding was the fact that Ye Chong's mech was only a Lasherl. Lasherl, namely the Soldier Major, is a humanoid mech with low specification and built with a sturdy shell, providing an astronomical defense compared to other mechs of the same level. Additionally, it also has a mediocre or even unbearable speed and mobility, inferring it to be more of a threatening defensive niche in the field. It was especially threatening when the high-speed ranged shooting technique became a trend among the fighters, which just happened to be the biggest counter towards its guard, thus killing the population of lateral users close to extinction. Spectators booed at Ye Chong continuously upon seeing him maneuvering a lateral into the battlefield. Lord Cupine, categorized under overused, for its premium quality and high ranking in offensive forces, would have crashed this wall easily in one blow. Ye Chong found such expertise absolutely unnecessary and tediously lengthy in mastering the skills. It was too complex for a mere child who had never been through much like him to understand. But frankly speaking, he likes the lateral because not only was she the first humanoid model he piloted in the training field, she also looked quite similar to Winnie. In spite of her weight, she moves considerably faster than good old Winnie. A premium model dueling with a novice model can be compared to an armored warrior fighting a naked farmer. Nothing much can be expected from the results, seeing that there would be no dramatic twist or the what-ifs. The spectators watched in agreement that the Shield of Thorns' effortless victory would be justifiable from the model of Ye Chong's mech. It was a wrong model to begin with, but the unforeseen circumstances before the audiences had them gawping in awe and surprise. Lateral swoops down and struck its opponent. It took the Shield of Thorns by surprise as he sneers in discontentment. How badly does she want to taste death? Spectators booed in disbelief at a hero of the Zeros. Suddenly, the room was filled with silence as everyone stared at next spectacle with wide eyes. Judging from their reactions, everyone had the same thought: how does a heavy machine like lateral move this fast? Jaws dropped as they continued to observe the battle. Lateral circled Lord Cupine swiftly, and every swing of the sword confused the Shield of Thorns. At times, when he thought to have gotten the sequence of the attack, Lacquer One managed to pull a different trick. In the end, he failed to even land an attack on the highness, lateral. Lord Cupine was dazed in confusion. He was the one who owned a premium mech but was struck down by a novice mech. It dawned on him that the Lacquer One looks different, as if it was upgraded into a brand new model. Could it be that the lateral had been modified? Did he replace the engine? How can Lord Cupine not land a single strike even if Lacquer One was modified with marvelous craftsman skills? Are you freaking kidding me? Thoughts raced through his mind in frustration. Still, that was the reality, even if it was unbelievable. The lateral piloted by Ye Chong had the upper hand throughout the fight. However, Shield of Thorns was not a weak one either. He is well-rounded in offensiveness and defensiveness. He is like a sword as good as it's a shield. The traditional combination worked wonders in his hands, with various kinds of defense techniques: blocking, canceling, grinding and breaking. Holding up against lateral impeccably with the occasional glow of his sword coming from his sequence of defense, a prime manifestation of Lord Porcupine himself. In the Shield of the Thorns, one prick and you'll pay for it. Ye Chong was ignorant, as he did not produce the opportunity for a strike back, and he calmly carried on his inputs. Such a rare scene indeed. The fight was so overwhelming it had everyone on the edge of their seats, amazed by the tension of the battle. They immediately whipped out their hologram recorders to capture this precious fight. Right after the fight ended, the scenes were posted into a discussion forum which attracted enough attention to be crowned as the top news on the site. Fans had gone through the visuals and were astounded by the skillfulness of Ye, as they all agreed from their discovery that the lateral was an original, unmodified model and that her speed was already at its maximum. The difference was, however, piloted her in a fair set of movement with sharp turning points rapidly done between each step, and by the time Mr. Shield of Thorns could land an attack, would have placed her at a safer point, an illusion created that the lateral outsped the Lord Cupine. In addition, the heftiness of lateral was an advantage utilized. According to the analysis based on the visuals, the direction of the sword was aligned with the direction of impulse from lateral herself in every strike. To put it simply, every attack made had an enormous amount of kinetic energy under the highest speed of the mech, making lateral into a killer machine, brandishing to land a strike. Without a doubt, Lacquer 1 was an intimidating opponent. Regardless of the mech's model, be it a fighting type or the shooting type, the core would always be the speed of control. When the speed of mech is high, maintaining the accuracy of inputs would have been highly difficult even with the aid of a powerful processor. Technically, when the mech reaches a velocity that passes the highest capacity by more than 70%, the struggle to maintain an accurate input would steeply increase. While he broke the speed cap and was still able to glide like a bird, the other pilots who were watching couldn't help but to salute him out of deep respect. To think that those outcomes of the investigation were already astonishing, there's more. One attentive pilot calculated Ye's movements, in 3 seconds, within a distance of mere 100 meters, had already executed sharp low-angled turnings 8 times. When the results were posted on the site, the pressure was exerted and the anxiety brewed. Such technique was called the low-angled turning, the most practical and yet the most challenging technique to perform by the speedy models. Well, almost all pilots knew the trick, but it was still the hardest one to play out. The sharp turnings while traveling at maximum speed would constantly bring discomfort to the pilot's body, which would heighten as the speed increases. 8 continuous low-angled turnings in 3 seconds was a baffling accomplishment. It was almost as if he was a mutated ape from another galaxy. The community thought that this was preposterous and started doubting if the calculation was done correctly or not. The network was a virtual reality. If he couldn't do it outside the virtual world, he could never do it here. The system would have prompted him about system failure right away. Questions filled the air about a man achieving the unachievable. Could a mortal's body be this durable? Anyone that knew about the mysterious started to monitor him as fans awaited more mind-boggling matches to test the limits of their hearts. Chapter 18, Turn-in Events. Is like a never-ending cave of treasure where one will not see the end because there's always a new trick up his sleeves that constantly caught everyone by surprise. Skills ranged from the Thomas spin to the wavy step were classic moves that were like bread and butter to the pilots. As fundamental as they were, the skills became something that was extraordinary when executed by Ye, at the same time deadly as well. Moreover, his emergence shattered the dogma of how advanced techniques would win them all, and the superstitions of how a premium mech would determine victory in the general public. The trends have evolved into a new era where basic moves were in the spotlight once again. There were even some who identified and compiled every set of moves used by Ye in the visuals available as new references in the textbooks. Not once did Ye ever comment about his reputation. He had unfailingly challenged 3 pilots a day and vanished right after. No one could tell who he was and no one would know where he came from. He would always remain a mystery among the community which had initiated a cult of his fandom, those that crazed for his appearance and craved for his flaunt of skills. Contrary to the habits of the pilots, Ye had never operated only one particular kind of mech. Instead, he changed them regularly, and all of them also happened to be the pre-made models. Pre-made models were more of the majority than modified models in the field. These models were mostly used of commoners like due to the fact that they could not afford to modify their meshes, which would cost them a fortune. Plus, these standard models have stark disadvantages compared to the modified models, but despite that, brought life into them. Every single ounce of the mesh's capacity had been utilized, their wills were resuscitated, and the continuous episode of the week surpassing the strong replayed on the battlefield. Whenever you piloted a different type of mech, a brand new variation of strategies would get showcased and it would be beyond everyone else's imagination. The ending of his moves could hardly be predicted. Like the master among the experts, every input was under his control and anything under his vicinity could be killing weaponry. Once the champion fighter, the Son of Light, commented, "If he were to pilot a mech of the same level as mine, I'm not even sure whether I could take him down." The visuals of Ye's battles were the hottest items in the virtual world. He could be seen as rather impulsive fighter to the other world, but he could not care less. Ye Chong was not concerned about whoever that sang for his victories and thirsted for his fights, his life would not be altered by them. The battles that he partook up until now was to sharpen his ability and to improvise the chance of survival on this dying planet of trash. Without a doubt his mentor Shang was amazed. This is a good trick. You could think about keeping it. Shang praised as he watched Ye Chong perform a low-angled turning. Later in the days, Ye Chong had a new daily task at hand, which is to pilot Shang. Wow, Mu actually pulled off a significant low-angled turning about 20 times in 3 seconds. That is scary. Ye Chong mumbled to himself. The first ride ended up as quite a horrifying experience to Ye Chong. He had to drag his feet out of the cabin with his face drained of color and his legs trembled. Before he could even utter a word, he threw up drastically and was forced to take a break for the next few days despite having a strong physique. Damn it, Mu. How could you do this to me? You actually shut down the cabin pressure buffering system? Ye Chong muttered in complaint as he flopped on the bed while shooting a glare at Mu, who was smirking at the side. HMPH. The side effect does not seem too bad. We could still increase intensity. Ye Chong was exasperated, but with a final blow, he was knocked out. Mu was definitely not joking around, and as expected, he really did raise the intensity by turning it up a notch. Fortunately, Ye Chong too was not a typical fighter. With buffed up muscles like a mutated ape, he made it through the first few days of piloting Mu, and as time passed, such training had become the easiest part of his day. Jeb shrieked, "What? We had lost contract?" Butler Chu responded, "Yes. I too have not the slightest idea on what's going on, but we had indeed lost contact with the 4 Mavericks we sent. They seem to have disappeared. I suspect." "What do you suspect?" Butler Chu glanced at his master. "I suspect. They could be in grave danger." "Grave danger? What do you mean?" "I had heard from Searlewood that the Mavericks hold the ability to disrupt the neurological system of a man's brain through the network of the virtual world, given they were strong enough." I speculated. "Were these happen to be for real?" Jeb was fuming in disbelief. "Why does a man like me have never heard of such story? Are you pulling my legs?" "No, sire. There's no way I would dare to offend your greatness." The butler quickly begged for forgiveness. "I shall fulfill all the orders by your greatness, whatever it take, on my own. I would and only would do it by myself." "If it's for your greatness, how would I dare to be negligent and let others take over?" "Of course you wouldn't dare." Jeb snorted. He hesitated for a moment. Is this the end of the whole episode? Jeb knew very well ever since he was born into a big family like this about the dangers of making enemies in the field, especially those who lurk in darkness whom he couldn't see. Butler Chu exhaled in relief, knowing that he would be the last one to die even in the worst case scenario. Master is such a decisive and forgiving leader. At the same time, he did not forget to butter up to Jeb. Jeb snickered at his compliment and felt overjoyed. It has been 3 days since Angel had vaporized from the virtual world. Day by day he feared and regretted of what he had done and wondered why he would be so impulsive as to accept that foolish request. The nightmare haunted him like a skeleton in a closet, clouding his mind. He was furious. For a maverick like him, being forbidden to go on virtual web was like a bird losing its wings to fly. Regardless, he dared not oppose his own will. If virtual web was his wings, he would rather not to lose his life over it. For 3 days he curled up in the gloomy cottage, feeling a little insecure. The 5th day came and the former glory gleam on his face was long gone. Now, all that was left were the horrors which prevailed from the torture he had been through. On the 8th day, he snapped. His wrinkled hands reached out to the helmet at the corner. If he were to die, an instant death was always better than suffering in pain. Well, what am I even thinking? Maybe the guy didn't even recognize me at all. I'm just overthinking. Why would he care? His fingers gently caressed the round surface of the helmet. The expression plastered on his face was like one in a trance as he thought to himself, to go or not to go? The decisions drummed in his head. He still could not come to a decision. At last, biting his teeth, he put on his helmet and logged in. He became calm as he stood in a moving crowd and looked upon the virtual world. He walked for a few hours, yet nothing had happened, but a wave of relief washed over him. Apparently, it was indeed him overthinking things. Tranquility started filling his heart as he began to hum and strolled towards a gathering spot for mavericks to get some info, because there were still doubts that nagged in him. Who was this? I had never heard of a maverick of such kind? He queried, and would absolutely like to find out more about this guy. And out of a sudden, the world shook. Chapter 19, Sudden Attack. The ground shook and Angel felt sunken, as he was pulled beyond his own weight. He could barely react in time as he lost control of his body. It might be happening in the virtual world, yet his body was soaked with cold sweat. A mystical voice boomed into his ears, "You have finally come. I have waited long enough." Angel replied in a trembled voice, Who are you?" He acted frankly, for it was perhaps the last day or the last moment of his life. The reason being that he would really want to know the identity of this man among the mavericks, not with vengeance, but with admiration. He had earned his respect during the battle before for his outstanding performance in any aspect of the field that Angel could not compete. Like an alpine mountain in his career, steep and craggy, became the idol in his mind. If he were to be dead afterwards, due to Angel would be fine and have no complaint with that fact. He was prepared for the consequences, knowing the fact that he could have been a member of the Mavericks all this while. Angel froze alone in a distorted posture in place. There wasn't anybody around. A fading voice flashed before him, "Keek, haven't you done your research? How could you still not know who I am?" The question had Angel pale and frightened. "I know I am impotent to you. But why the trickery? It's not funny." A moment of silence struck the place. The voice lingered apologetically, "I'm sorry for what I've done just now." And it dramatically turned into a bloodthirsty voice, "But I know. You are certain of why I am here, aren't you?" Angel shuddered. "I knew it. What's coming to him would arrive in the end. Well, there wouldn't be a need for him to keep hiding anymore." Angel then confessed everything, from how he got his deal, to how he hacked into the core of the training ground, without holding back. He was ready for death as he closed his eyes, with his mouth shut tightly immediately after the confession. He awaited his death, but nothing occurred. And by the time he had realized it, his body regained its mobility. "If you want to kill me, just do it already." His shaking voice trailed off in the street where a few pedestrians had their eyes fixed on Angel in deep pity, as if seeing an idiot in his own melodrama. Did he let go of me? For real? He was in disbelief. He tried lifting himself up from his feet. The unforgettable voice from the previous oblivion was not ringing in his ears anymore. Angel, who held back his flooding tears, slammed the logout button at light speed. At Lwo's research center. The manager rested in his cozy armchair, setting his eyes upon the view of the outside world through the highly transparent glass window. He watched the people below hurry by, as a feeling of serenity surged through his body, for he knew that this very research institute is the heart of the Wu family and is significant to what kept their family going strong. Due to Lwo's authority, the existence of this institute had been safely protected in secret. The strength of this research center. It would be among the first few in the entire Foul Galaxy. The lord of this family entrusted him with this center. What faith in his capability! He had thought so, as he snickered. An outsider earning this much of trust from the Lord, this is more than a mere achievement. But well, I heard there was a dispute between the young master and the Lord. Wonder if it's true. Sigh. Every family has their own difficulty, not even the great Lord, wise and decisive, could prevent this. Still, this was very strange. The young master had always been known for his gentle and humble nature, a genuine man, and a likable character to the Lord. Then why the dispute? Almost everyone in the house presumed the young master was to be the successor to the Wu family. Even the Lord himself claimed in a few occasions that the young master could take his legacy and become the next prominent figure in the family. Does that mean he is now keener towards the younger master? It couldn't be. That young man only knew how to spend his rotten life wallowing in his gambling and prostitution. There was not once he caused problem without raising the name of the Wu family. Oh, all the nonsense he had done. The people hate him. Even the Lord hates him to the bone. The Lord couldn't have been this dim-witted, could he? The fiasco panicked everyone under the roof. There hadn't been good news coming from the authority and nobody wanted to know the details, for it would cost their head if they knew about it. His pondering was interrupted by the alarm that came wailing. Luo Rinhuo jumped up from his chair and rushed to the lobby, upholding his nature of responsibility, always being in the front line, as complimented by his lord. The institute had descended into chaos. The researchers scurried around in fear. He scowled and shouted, "What's with the panic? Everyone, get back into your positions. Mo Lai and Fu, what's going on?" His steadiness influenced the men and the situation became under control. His reputation among the men had pacified the institute. A slender man quickly reported, "Manager, we have been attacked. Our processor was damaged and we have lost control. What should we do? We're doomed at this rate." Lost control? His head was bombarded by bewilderment for a while, with his eyes reflecting the horrified look of Mo Lai and Fu waiting for further commands. Luoren was finally conscious. Surely he could not go wrong at this stage, if not, everything else would go wrong. They sprinted to the processor control room, where the usually empty room was crowded by people by then. None of the crowd were tranquil. An aged researcher waved at them. "Elder Mo, how's the situation? Could we retrieve control?" Manager's tone was somber, but he tried maintaining respect towards Elder Mo, for he was Mo Lai and Fu's grandfather, who also happened to be the senior researcher in the institute. Even the Lord would address him as Elder Mo. Elder Mo shook his head. "It's really, really bad. The attacker might have been a maverick, who snuck in stealthily into our institute. Oh! How could we have not noticed? The shame." Elder Mo felt sorry for his helplessness. "Is there really no way to resolve this?" Manager Luo nervously asked. Elder Mo pointed his fingers towards 10 men in helmets. "Well, we would have to depend on them. They are the experts among the mavericks we could find. Hopefully they could at least trace the attacker in the virtual network." He pondered, "It would be best if you inform the Lord right away and call for aid." Manager Luo went to connect with the communicator on the spot. As the research institute held great significance, all the reporting goes to the master, directly. Connection failed. Connection failed. Connection failed. He tried connecting for some time but all of them failed. The manager's face further drained. An intuition pulsed within him that something bad had happened. What if the Lord was attacked too? His heart skipped a beat. This is a planned attack. Everything was well chained and well guarded. And they could only passively stay. Who in the world is this brilliant attacker? He whispered, "Elder Mo, stay here and watch over everybody. I'll go get back up from the Lord." And he jumped right through the window. "Wait. This is the 80th floor of the building. Manager." As he fell freely in the air, his right pointing finger and middle finger fondled the mech warping button and in an instant, a blazing red humanoid mech appeared before him. He grabbed the right arm swiftly and slid into the cabin. All engines on. Full speed to northwest. Chapter 20, Aftermath. When Manager Luo made his arrival at Luo's HQ, he finally realized how serious the situation had turned out. The Luo suffered immense loss this time. It is beyond calculation. When he saw the Lord, he couldn't believe his eyes. The sulky man in his elderly was the wisest leader of the family for the past 200 years. The confidence, grace and exerting pride were no longer seen by then. The lord before him was merely an elder in despair. There wasn't much for him to do anymore, thus the manager backed away. This time, the resultant attack caused an estimated loss that everyone in the house feared. A fatal blow in the record of the Wo's reign. If it wasn't for the young master who took over the place straight away after the raid, the chaos would not have ended just yet. The raid's source was inferred to have come from the virtual world, as all units that made direct connection to the virtual world were involved in the attack. Moreover though, in this raid the attacker had also applied indirect attacks with external forces, meaning the inputs were too from the network. After some analysis made by Wo's own technicians, these attacks were believed to be done single-handedly. That means, there could only be one man on the other side. If it's so, it would be terrorizing. One man? One man who could perform such detailed planning with such complicated calculation, instantaneously on all units? Does he have shadow partners or something? At this point, everyone showed disbelief. The attacker did not leave any form of trail, not even his input calculations. Statistics depicted that right at the first moment of the attack, there had already been 89 Mavericks and more than 200 technicians at an attempt to stop the coming attack in the virtual network. The figure showed a steep increase to 152 Mavericks and about 400 technicians online. The manpower of the Wo's was so powerful, even the G family, the expert of the experts for the processor, that would not be easy to take on, yet they failed to even identify the attacker. The attack could not be stopped. They could only watch everything that was happening before them. Who is this attacker? Why is he attacking the Wo? Revenge? Anger? Other kinds of motive? The questions puzzled the young master who had just taken over. Luo Heng was disturbed. If he could not find out who the attacker was, then he would have to bear the upcoming attacks unknowingly. This is really bad for the family. This would be equivalent to being choked by the attacker, as all the business running under the institute had connections with the virtual world. People around speculated that this could be done purposely by other competing families in Fao, as it seemed they could be the only suspects. But only Luo Heng was well aware that it could never be them. The four major families that held the veins of technological development in Fao, the Wo, the Yuan, the Gu and the Ji families. They all shared similar strengths. Even if the second strongest Ji families could not have wounded the Wo this hard. Plus, the connections between the families were more than just complications. There had been various occasions where they had cross-family marriages, balancing out the mutuality among them carefully. He believed that such kind of attack would not benefit any of them in the long run, and none of the family would be this short-sighted. Out of the blue, the communicator buzzed on the desk. He knotted his brows briefly. "Haven't I told them that I do not want to be disturbed at the moment?" He pressed the accept button. A partially translucent interface showed up before him. Oddly enough, there wasn't anything on the screen, and a dubious voice came from the other side. "Greetings. It was such a pity that I could not appear to celebrate this occasion. Oh, I almost forgot. Congratulations on becoming the successor of the family. You have finally showed up, huh?" Luo Heng almost could not hold his agitation. "Who are you? And why are you attacking the Wo? What has the Wo family done to you?" The voice replied teasingly, "Well, for that, you have to ask your own brother. To avoid any unnecessary inconvenience, I decided to demonstrate a little bit of my capability, just enough to warn you all." Jeb. Luo Heng roared in his heart. "Very well then, how would you like to end this?" Luo Heng acknowledged the difference between them, thus he put them aside inferiorly. The person tittered in the communicator, "I've already said, this is merely a forewarning. If you all could leave me alone, perhaps I could save some more time and not waste it on things like this. So, my recommendation would be, you all should abort any kinds of actions against me. Of course, this is only my 2 cents. If you have confidence in your men, you could just disregard it and let it slip by like a winter breeze. But, you better be prepared for my next attack." What a blatant threat. Damn it, The young master cursed in his mind, but there's nothing else better than this for things to end. The Luo currently needed time more than anything else, to rebuild forces. He weakly responded, "Are you sincere in your words?" "Certainly. Honesty is always my virtue." "All right then. We have a deal." A knock on the door resounded from the other side of the room. "Looks like it is time for me to leave. Goodbye." The screen darkened as the call was hung up. "Come in." His assistants walked in and humbly reminded, "Master, your break time is over, next on the schedule would be. Go get Jeb right now." At the Foul Mech Pilot Association, FMPA, the shorty was chatting with the Tolly. The Tolly laughed, "Did you check out that match with?" "I did." The shorty nodded. "How was it?" "He has very firm foundation in his skills. Not many men could be better in this regard." The Tolly was a bit surprised. "Oh, that means you think that he is underperforming in everything else than the basic moves?" "Yes, I do agree the fact that he still needs some tweaks in other aspects of piloting, but I must say, he sure had some shocking growth over time." The Tolly agreed, "Right. His talent is beyond expertise. A bright future lies ahead of him." "Ye. What's your count on him?" Shorty was proud. "In 3 years, he would still not even be my opponent." The Tolly giggled, "What about 3 years after?" "Well, it would have to depend on his rate of improvement. But at this point, there's a high chance he could easily surpass me in 3 years." The Tolly lowered his voice, "I guess they had started to notice him, haven't they? Such talent, with such a grand debut he made in the battlefield, how he could expect they would not notice?" "Do you think he would be chosen?" The shorty asserted, "Of course he would." "Are you sure?" The shorty was serious in his tone. That man was as if he was born for mech. "But the FMPA says they don't even have a profile for him." "Well then, just let them be bothered with that, we watch our match." The Tolly chuckled, "Right. Hi. This is Novel Admire. Thanks for the visit. Come back again for more novels.